The first thing I noticed when I stepped off the transport plane at Fort Bragg wasn't the familiar North Carolina humidity or the sound of helicopters overhead. It was my phone buzzing with 17 missed calls from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, all timestamped from the past 3 hours. My name is Marcus Webb, and I just completed a 9-month deployment in Afghanistan as a combat engineer. All I wanted was to drive the 2 hours home to my small house in Millbrook, crack open a beer, and sleep in my own bed for the first time in nearly a year. Instead, I was staring at a voicemail that made my blood run cold. "Marcus, honey, I don't know how to tell you this." Mrs. Patterson's shaky voice came through my phone speaker. "But there's a moving truck at your house. Your sister Elena is there with some woman in a business suit, and they're loading up your furniture." I tried to ask what was happening, but Elena told me to mind my own business. She said the house was sold and you knew all about it. "But Marcus, I know you'd have told me if." I didn't wait to hear the rest. My hands were shaking as I dialed Elena's number. "Marcus." Her voice was artificially bright when she answered. "You're back. How was your deployment?" "Elena, what the hell is happening to my house?" A pause. "Too long." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Patterson called. She said there's a moving truck. She said you sold my house. Of that. Elena's tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Look, I can explain everything. You were gone so long, and the mortgage payments were piling up. I had to do something. I set up automatic payments before I left. The mortgage was current. Well, there were other expenses. Property taxes, maintenance, utilities. It was becoming a burden on the family. I found a buyer willing to take it off our hands." "Take it off our hands." My voice rose, drawing stares from other soldiers in the terminal. "It's my house, Elena. I bought it with my VA loan. Your name isn't on anything." "Actually, it is. Remember when you deployed the first time 3 years ago? You gave me power of attorney to handle your affairs while you were gone. I never revoked it." My stomach dropped. She was right. After my first deployment, I'd been so grateful for her help managing things that I'd never thought to revoke the legal documents. "Elena, tell me you didn't sell my house." Silence. "Elena, it's done, Marcus. The papers are signed, the money's transferred. I got $50,000 for it, which was actually pretty good considering the neighborhood's been declining." $50,000. My house was worth at least $180,000. I'd had it appraised before deployment. "Who did you sell it to?" "A woman named Victoria Hartwell. She was very interested in the property, said she wanted to flip it. The name meant nothing to me, but I filed it away." "Elena, this is fraud. You can't just sell someone else's property." "I had legal authority, and frankly, Marcus, you should be thanking me. You were never going to be able to keep up with the payments on your Army salary. This way, you have some cash to start over." "Start over?" I was shouting now. "I don't want to start over. I want my house back." "Well, that's not possible." "Look, I have to go. The buyers want to do a final walkthrough. We'll talk when you get home." She hung up. I stood there in the middle of Fort Bragg's terminal, still in my ACUs, watching families reunite around me while my world crumbled. Elena had stolen my house. My sanctuary. The place I dreamed about every night in a dusty Afghan outpost. But here's what Elena didn't know. I'm a combat engineer. My job is planning, preparation, and explosive solutions to complex problems. And before every deployment, I plan for every contingency, including the possibility that someone might try to break into my house while I was gone. The drive home took 3 hours instead of 2 because I stopped at a Best Buy in Raleigh. When I finally turned onto Maple Street, my heart sank. Mrs. Patterson had been right. The moving truck was gone. But my house, my beautiful brick ranch with the blue shutters I painted myself, sat empty. Even from the street, I could see it was completely vacant. Elena's Honda Civic was in the driveway. I parked my beat-up Jeep behind her car, blocking her in, and walked up to my own front door. It felt surreal using my key, wondering if the locks had been changed. They hadn't. "Elena," I called out as I stepped inside. My voice echoed. The house was completely empty except for Elena, who was standing in what used to be my living room with a woman in an expensive-looking pantsuit. The woman had perfect blonde hair and carried herself like someone used to getting her way. "Marcus," Elena's smile was fake as plastic. "You made good time. This is Victoria Hartwell, the buyer I told you about." Victoria extended a manicured hand. Mr. Webb, thank you for your service. Your sister has told me so much about you. I ignored her hand. Where's my furniture? The sale included all furnishings, Victoria said smoothly. It was part of the package deal. My grandmother's dining room set, my father's tools, my personal belongings. Elena waved dismissively. I put a few things in storage, the important stuff. But honestly, Marcus, most of it was junk. This is better for everyone. $50,000, I said quietly. That's what you got. It's a fair price, Victoria interjected. The market in this area has been soft and the house needed work. I walked through my empty home, noting every detail. The scuff marks on the hardwood floors where my couch had been. The faded rectangles on the walls where my pictures had hung. The empty kitchen where I planned to cook my first home-cooked meal in 9 months. I need to see the paperwork, I said. Elena pulled out a folder. Everything's legal, Marcus. I made sure of that. I scanned the documents. She was right. Technically, everything appeared to be in order. The power of attorney gave her broad authority. The deed transfer was properly notarized. Victoria had even paid cash, which expedited the process. But something bothered me about Victoria. She kept checking her phone and seemed eager to leave. When Elena mentioned she'd stored some of my things, Victoria's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, Victoria said, checking an expensive watch, I should get going. I have another appointment. That's when I noticed something interesting. Through the front window, I could see a black Mercedes in the driveway across the street. The license plate read, Hey R21. Presumably Victoria's car. But she'd walked up to my house, not driven. Nice car, I commented. Is that yours across the street? Victoria glanced out the window and her face flushed slightly. Of that? Yes, I didn't want to block your driveway. Except my driveway wasn't blocked. Elena's car was there, but there was plenty of room. Victoria, I said casually, what do you do for work? Real estate development, she replied quickly. Which company? A pause. Hartwell Properties. It's family-owned. Elena was watching our exchange with growing discomfort. Marcus, stop interrogating her. The sale is final. I'm not interrogating anyone, just making conversation. I turned back to Victoria. Hartwell Properties. I think I've heard of that company. Didn't they just get that big commercial contract downtown? Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went pale. I really do need to go. Elena, thank you for everything. Mr. Webb again. Thank you for your service. She practically ran out of the house. Elena watched her go, then turned to me. See, she seems nice. And she paid cash, no financing complications. You should be grateful. Where are you staying these days, Elena? She looked surprised by the question. The same place I've always lived. The apartment on Glenwood. Still working at Morrison & Associates. Of course. Why? Morrison & Associates was a mid-size accounting firm downtown. I made a mental note. Just curious. It's been 9 months. A lot can change. Elena gathered her paperwork. Look, Marcus, I know you're upset. But this really is for the best. You can use the money for a down payment somewhere else. Maybe closer to base. Maybe, can I get the address for the storage unit? I'd like to get my personal things. She handed me a piece of paper with an address written in her handwriting. Unit 47. I pay for 3 months in advance. After Elena left, I sat on the floor in my empty house and tried to process what had happened. 9 months of dreaming about coming home, and home no longer existed. But Elena had made one critical error. She assumed that a soldier deployed overseas couldn't monitor his property. I pulled out the laptop I'd bought at Best Buy and connected to my neighbor's Wi-Fi. Password still Patterson 123 like always. Then I logged into an account Elena didn't know existed. Before my deployment, I'd installed a comprehensive security system. Not just cameras, though there were 8 of those, hidden in inconspicuous locations around the property. I'd also installed audio recording devices, motion sensors, and even a GPS tracker hidden in my truck, which Elena had obviously moved. The security company's cloud storage contained 9 months of footage. I started with the most recent files and worked backward. There was Victoria's car arriving this morning. There was Elena directing the movers yesterday. There was, interesting, 3 weeks ago, there was footage of Elena bringing Victoria to the house for what appeared to be a showing. But in the audio, I heard something that made my blood boil. "He'll never know," Elena was saying as she walked Victoria through my kitchen. "My brother's a simple soldier. He trusts me completely. Once the sale goes through, it'll be too late for him to do anything about it. And you're sure he won't contest it?" Victoria's voice was clear on the recording. "With what? He's halfway around the world. By the time he gets back, you'll own the house and I'll have the money. He can be mad all he wants. What about the neighbors? They mind their own business. And even if they don't, so what? I have power of attorney. Everything I'm doing is legal." Victoria laughed. "You know my husband is going to love this. He's been looking for investment properties and getting one this far under market value is perfect." "Your husband?" "David Hartwell. He runs Morrison and Associates downtown." My heart stopped. David Hartwell, Elena's boss. I scrolled through more footage, looking for patterns. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Elena had been bringing Victoria to my house for months, not just for showings, but for what appeared to be personal visits. In several videos, I watched them walk through my home like they already owned it, pointing at rooms and discussing renovation plans. But the worst footage was from 6 weeks ago. Elena and Victoria were in my bedroom, and Elena was going through my personal belongings, showing Victoria items like they were for sale. "This watch was our grandfather's," Elena said, holding up a vintage Timex, "probably worth a few $100s. "I'll take it," Victoria replied. "David collects vintage timepieces." They went through my closet, my dresser drawers, even my bathroom medicine cabinet. Elena was cataloging my life, pricing out my possessions like I was already dead. The audio from that day was crystal clear. "You know," Victoria said, "I feel a little bad about this. Your brother seems like a good guy." Elena's laugh was cold. "Marcus has always been the family favorite. The war hero, the responsible one. Do you know he bought this house when he was 23? 23. While I was struggling to make rent on a studio apartment. That must have been hard. He acts like he's so much better than everyone else. Look at me. I serve my country. I own property. I'm so responsible." Well, let's see how responsible he feels when he comes home to nothing. The money will help though, right? 50,000 is nothing to sneeze at. "The money's just the beginning," Elena replied. "Once this house sells, I'm moving to Charlotte. New job, new life. Marcus can figure out his own problems for once." I had heard enough. The next morning, I drove to Morrison and Associates. The receptionist directed me to David Hartwell's office on the 3rd floor. The nameplate on the door confirmed what I'd already suspected: David Hartwell, managing partner. I knocked and entered without waiting for permission. David Hartwell was about 50, with graying hair and the soft physique of a man who spent his days behind a desk. He looked up from his computer with mild annoyance. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Hartwell, my name is Marcus Webb. I believe your wife just bought my house." His expression shifted immediately. Surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been panic. What can I do for you, Mr. Webb?" I pulled out my laptop and set it on his desk. "I'd like to show you something." I played the footage from 3 weeks ago. Elena's voice filled the office. "He'll never know. He's a simple soldier. He trusts me completely." David's face went progressively paler as the video played. That's not what Victoria told me." "What did Victoria tell you?" "She said it was a legitimate sale. Your sister needed to sell quickly because of your deployment, and they worked out a fair deal." I played another clip, this one from 6 weeks ago. Victoria's voice. "I feel a little bad about this. Your brother seems like a good guy." Elena's response. "Let's see how responsible he feels when he comes home to nothing." David put his head in his hands. "Oh God. Mr. Hartwell, I'm not here to cause problems for you or your wife. But I need my house back. We paid cash, $50,000. For a house worth $180,000. You knew it was underpriced. Victoria handles our real estate investments. I trusted her judgment." I played one more clip, the most damning one. From 4 weeks ago, Victoria and Elena were discussing the sale with brutal honesty. "The best part," Elena was saying, "is that even when Marcus finds out, there's nothing he can do. The sale will be legal, the money will be spent, and he'll be screwed." "What if he gets lawyers involved?" Victoria asked. "With what money? He's an enlisted soldier." I know exactly how much he makes, and it's not enough for a legal battle against us." David looked sick. Victoria never mentioned. She said it was just a good investment opportunity. "Mr. Hartwell, I have 9 months of footage showing systematic fraud, conspiracy, and theft. I have audio recordings of your wife and my sister planning to steal my house while I was serving overseas. I have documentation of them going through my personal belongings like vultures." I closed the laptop. "I'm going to give you one opportunity to make this right. What do you want?" "I want the sale reversed. Full refund of your $50,000, immediate transfer of the deed back to my name, and the return of all my personal property. And if we do that, then this stays between us. No criminal charges, no public humiliation, no news stories about how an accounting firm owner conspired to defraud a deployed soldier." David was quiet for a long moment. "You could destroy me." "Yes, I could. Your firm handles contracts with the city, the county, and 3 military contractors. How do you think they'd react to footage of your wife planning to steal from a deployed soldier?" He picked up his phone and dialed. "Victoria, come to my office, now." 10 minutes later, Victoria Hartwell walked into her husband's office. She saw me and froze. "Sit down," David said quietly. "David, what's?" "Sit down." She sat. David played the footage. All of it. 9 months of evidence compressed into 20 minutes of devastating audio and video. By the end, Victoria was crying. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "Yes, you did," I said calmly. "You planned this for months. You and Elena conspired to steal my house while I was deployed, thinking I'd never be able to fight back. We paid for it. You paid $50,000 for a house worth $180,000, using fraudulent power of attorney documents while I was serving in Afghanistan. That's not a purchase. That's theft." David leaned back in his chair. "Victoria, did you know the house was worth more than $50,000? She didn't answer. "Victoria. "Yes," she whispered. "How much more?" The county assessment was $175,000. David closed his eyes. When he opened them, his voice was deadly calm. "You stole from a soldier. I didn't steal anything. Elena had power of attorney. Elena committed fraud, and you helped her," I said. "The question now is what we're going to do about it." David looked at me. "What do you need from us?" "The deed transferred back to my name by tomorrow morning. Full return of the $50,000. And I want every stick of my furniture, every personal item, everything returned to the house by tomorrow evening." "What about Elena?" Victoria asked. "Elena is my problem. But if you cooperate fully, I won't involve the police or the district attorney." David nodded. "We'll make it right." "David," Victoria protested. "We'll make it right," he repeated firmly. "Victoria, you just destroyed our reputation, our marriage, and possibly our freedom. The least we can do is return this man's house." The next morning, I received a call from David's attorney. The deed transfer was complete. By afternoon, a moving truck was returning my furniture to 47 Maple Street. Everything was there, even my grandfather's watch. Elena called that evening, screaming, "You son of a bitch. What did you do?" "I came home," I said calmly. "Victoria said you had recordings. You were spying on me. I was protecting my property, which, as it turns out, was a good idea. This is harassment. I'll sue you." "With what money, Elena?" "I understand you were planning to move to Charlotte with the proceeds from selling my house. How's that working out for you?" Silence. "Elena, I gave you every opportunity to do the right thing. When I called you from Fort Bragg, you could have told me the truth. When I asked you yesterday about the sale, you could have shown some remorse. Instead, you doubled down on stealing from me. It wasn't stealing." "Yes, it was. And you know what the worst part is? It was never about the money for you. You said it yourself in the recordings. This was about resentment, about wanting to hurt me. You always got everything," she exploded. "The perfect son, the war hero, the homeowner. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? I bought that house with my VA loan after serving 2 tours in Iraq, Elena. I worked double shifts at the hardware store while going to college. I saved every penny for 3 years. Nothing was given to me. You make it sound so noble. It's not noble. It's just life. And you tried to steal it while I was serving my country." She was crying now. "What happens to me?" "That depends. Are you willing to make this right? What do you mean? The storage unit. I want the key, and I want you to be there when I open it. I want to see everything you took from my house. The next day, Elena met me at the storage facility. She looked terrible, hollow-eyed and haggard, like she hadn't slept. Unit 47 was packed floor to ceiling with my belongings. Not just furniture, but everything. My books, my photos, my military memorabilia, even my kitchen utensils. You were really going to sell all of this, I said, looking around. I don't know. I was angry. At me? At everything. At my life, at my job. At being 32 years old and having nothing to show for it. I picked up a framed photo of our parents. So you decided to take mine. Elena sat down on a box and put her head in her hands. I messed up, Marcus. I messed up so bad. Yes, you did. What now? Are you pressing charges? I've been thinking about that question for 2 days. Elena had committed multiple felonies. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. She could go to prison for years. But she was still my sister. I should, I said finally, but I'm not going to. She looked up, surprised. However, I continued, there are conditions. What conditions? First, you pay for moving all of this stuff back to my house. Second, you get help. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes to figure out why you thought this was acceptable. Third, you apologize to Mrs. Patterson for lying to her and dragging her into this mess. That's it. That's it. But Elena, if you ever try something like this again, if you even think about taking advantage of me or anyone else in our family, I won't be this generous. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. And Elena? We're done. I don't want to see you or hear from you until you've gotten serious help. When you're ready to be my sister again instead of my enemy, call me. It took 3 days to move everything back into the house. Mrs. Patterson helped, bringing over casseroles and expressing outrage on my behalf. The other neighbors, once they learned what had happened, rallied around me with offers of help and support. Elena left for Charlotte the following week. She sent me a text saying she'd started therapy and was sorry for everything. I didn't respond. David Hartwell filed for divorce 2 months later. Victoria moved back in with her parents in Greensboro. Morrison and Associates weathered the scandal, but David resigned as managing partner and sold his stake in the firm. And me? I'm sitting in my living room right now, in my house, surrounded by my things, typing this story on my laptop. The same laptop I used to confront the people who tried to steal my life while I was serving my country. Mrs. Patterson is making dinner for us tonight, her famous pot roast. She says it's the least she can do for our neighborhood hero. I keep telling her I'm not a hero, just a soldier who came home to find out that sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought overseas. Sometimes they're fought in your own living room, against the people who are supposed to love you. But here's what I learned. Documentation beats deception every time. Preparation trumps betrayal, and family isn't about blood. It's about the people who have your back when everyone else is stabbing you in it. My security system is still recording, by the way. Not because I don't trust my neighbors, but because I learned that trust without verification is just wishful thinking. Elena thought she could steal my house because I was just a simple soldier halfway around the world. What she didn't count on was that this simple soldier had learned a few things about planning, preparation, and explosive solutions to complex problems. The explosion in this case was the truth, and it demolished her scheme completely. Welcome home, Marcus Webb. Your house is exactly where you left it.
The Perkins family legacy, my father declared, was not for me. My name is Louisa Perkins. I'm 38 years old, a real estate attorney, and for my entire life, I've been the footnote in my family's story. Today was supposed to be the day they finally wrote me out of the book entirely. We were seated around a ridiculously large mahogany table in the office of our family lawyer, a man whose face was permanently set in an expression of mild disappointment. The air was chilled, smelling of old paper and entitlement. On one side of the table sat the United Front, my father Reginald, a robust 67 with a jaw set in perpetual judgment, my mother Kennedy, 63 and as polished and cold as the pearls at her throat, and my older brother Andrew, the 41-year-old golden son, looking unbearably smug in a suit that cost more than my first car. And then there was me, alone on the other side, a deliberate island. "As you know," my father began, his voice booming with the false gravitas he used for all important pronouncements, "we are here to finalise the succession plan for the estate." He gestured vaguely, as if the sprawling 100-acre property and the historic family home were floating in the air between us. "It is a legacy built by generations of Perkins men, and it is my duty to ensure its continuity." I didn't flinch. I'd spent a lifetime learning not to. I simply kept my hands folded on the table and met his gaze. He cleared his throat, unable to hold my stare for long. "Andrew, as my son, will be taking full ownership of the estate and all associated assets. He has a family, a wife, a daughter. He understands the importance of the bloodline." Andrew preened, adjusting his tie. My mother gave a faint, approving nod, her expression unchanging. This was the natural order of things in their world. Men built legacies. Women were merely accessories to them. "Louisa," my father said, finally turning his attention to me. The pity in his eyes was the worst part. It was a thick, condescending syrup. "We have, of course, made a provision for you." The lawyer, Mr. Gable, slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a cashier's cheque, a generous one, I'll admit. Enough to be considered a respectable parting gift, but an insult when measured against the value of the land. It was a payoff, a dismissal. "We trust this will be sufficient for your needs," my father continued, the unspoken words hanging in the air. "For a single woman with no family to support." I ignored the cheque. "Why, father?" I asked, my voice even. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear him say it. I wanted the words to be spoken aloud, to exist in the room as a permanent record of his prejudice. He sighed, a gust of patriarchal weariness. "Louisa, you are a successful woman." "We are proud of that. But you chose a different path. You have no husband, no children. The Perkins name, the land, it needs to be passed down. A woman without a husband has no one to pass it on to." There it was, the line I had been waiting for. The culmination of 38 years of being told my worth was conditional upon my marital status. Andrew's smirk widened. He had won. He had always won. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting them all bask in their victory. I watched my father's chest puff out, my brother's smug satisfaction, my mother's serene detachment. They thought this was the end of the discussion. They thought I would take my cheque, offer a bitter but ultimately powerless protest, and disappear back into the life I had built for myself, away from them. They had no idea that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Slowly, deliberately, I reached down and opened my leather briefcase. The quiet clicks of the latches echoed in the silent room. I pulled out a single crisp document from a heavy folder. It was a deed. My deed. I slid it across the polished mahogany. It came to a stop right in front of my father's folded hands. He stared down at it, his brow furrowed in confusion. Andrew leaned over to look. "What is this?" Reginald demanded. I gave them a small, tight smile, the first real expression I'd shown all day. The deed was for a 10-acre plot of land, a long, narrow strip that looked insignificant on a map. But its location was everything. It was the only piece of land that provided direct, viable road access to the entire Perkins estate from the main highway. Without it, their 100-acre legacy was effectively landlocked. Here's to having no one, father. 10 years earlier, I was 28 and still believed I could earn my father's respect. The memory is so sharp it feels like yesterday. We were in his study, the one with the dark wood panelling and the smell of leather and disappointment. Andrew, then 31, was there, looking like the heir apparent he'd always been. My father had just announced that Andrew would be taking over the management of the family's investment portfolio, a role I had been working towards for years. "It's a matter of optics, Louisa," Reginald had said, not even looking at me. He was staring at a portrait of his own father on the wall. Andrew has a wife, a family on the way. He presents a more stable, traditional front. It's what investors want to see. I have better returns on my personal portfolio than he does, I'd argued, my voice tight. My degree is in finance law. Emerson is pregnant. That doesn't make Andrew a better money manager. It makes him a man with a legacy to protect, my father shot back, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were cold, dismissive. "You're a brilliant girl, but this is a man's world. Your role is different." I walked out of that study and didn't look back. That was the day I quit the family firm and started my own practice. It was also the day I called my best friend jailer. "He basically told me my only value is in who I marry," I said, pacing my tiny apartment. Jailer, who was 30 at the time and already twice as savvy as any man in my family, let out a low whistle. "Okay. So, are we crying about it, or are we getting even?" "Even," I said without hesitation. "I just don't know how." That's when Jailer, my fierce, loyal, brilliant business partner, pulled up the county zoning maps. We spent the next week fueled by coffee and spite, poring over every parcel of land that bordered the Perkins estate. Most of it was owned by families who would never sell, but then we found it. It was a 10-acre sliver of land, long and awkwardly shaped, owned by an out-of-state holding company that had acquired it in a bankruptcy auction decades ago. On the map it was a joke, too narrow to build on, too rocky for farming. Its only feature was a dilapidated dirt track that ran its entire length, connecting the main highway to the western fence line of my family's property. To anyone else, it was worthless. To a real estate attorney, it was a key. "It's the only non-Perkins land with direct highway frontage for miles," I'd murmured, tracing its outline on the screen. "If someone ever wanted to develop the main estate, they'd have to build a new road. But this is the most direct route, the only logical access point. They'll never sell the estate," Jailer said. "No," I agreed, "but one day they might need something. And when they do, they'll have to come through me." It took almost all of my savings, but the holding company was happy to unload the useless parcel for a price that was, even then, a steal. Jailer handled the paperwork, setting up a shell LLC to make the purchase. The name on the deed was anonymous, untraceable back to me. For 10 years that deed sat in a safe deposit box, a quiet promise I had made to my 28-year-old self, a weapon waiting to be used. Which brings me back to today. After leaving the lawyer's office, the first thing I did was call Jailer. I told her everything, the announcement, the check, the look on their faces when I slid my deed across the table. She was silent for a moment, and then she just laughed, a deep, satisfying sound. "Oh, to have been a fly on that mahogany wall. What did they do?" "They were stunned," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "My father tried to bluster, demanded to know when I'd bought it." Andrew just turned a very unattractive shade of red. "They know exactly what it means." "It means the king is in check," Jailer said. "So, what's your next move?" Before I could answer, her tone shifted, growing sharp and focused. "Actually, hold that thought. You're not going to believe this. I was just about to call you. That regional zoning proposal I've been tracking for the last 6 months, the one for the North County expansion?" My stomach tightened. I knew the one. "A massive infrastructure project. What about it?" It's not a proposal anymore, Lou. It's happening. An hour ago, Sterling Development submitted a formal bid to the council for the entire region. They want to build a high-end commercial and residential hub. And guess whose 100-acre legacy property sits right in the middle of their prime target zone? I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar. For 10 years my plan had been a defensive one, a shield. But now it was a sword. I walked over to the large map of the county hanging on my office wall and looked at the red pin I'd placed on my family's land years ago. I picked up another pin, this one a bright, glaring yellow, and stuck it right next to the first. "Let the games begin," I said. It took less than 48 hours for the panic to set in. My phone started ringing the morning after the meeting at the lawyer's office. First, it was my cousin Scarlett, fishing for gossip under the guise of concern. I didn't answer. Then a string of texts from Andrew, each more demanding than the last. I ignored those too. The call I was waiting for came that afternoon. My father's name flashed on the screen. "Louisa," he said, skipping any greeting. His voice was tight, stripped of its usual booming confidence. "We need to talk, privately. Come to the house for dinner tonight." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. A classic Perkins power play, bring the dissident back to the heart of the kingdom to remind them where the power lies. He thought the weight of the family home, the portraits of our ancestors, and my mother's icy disapproval would be enough to make me fold. "I'll be there at 7, I said, and hung up. I walked into the lion's den wearing a simple black dress and a calm expression I knew would infuriate them. The dinner was an ambush, just as I'd expected. My father, mother, Andrew and his wife, Emerson, were all there. Even their 10-year-old daughter, Myla, was present, quietly picking at her food at the far end of the long dining table. She was the child who had been on the way 10 years ago, the living symbol of the legacy I was supposedly unfit to carry on. The meal was a masterclass in passive aggression. My mother commented on how tiring it must be to run a business all by oneself. Andrew made a snide remark about hobby investments turning into headaches. My father steered the conversation toward the Sterling Development's bid, feigning a casual tone. This development proposal could be a magnificent opportunity for the family, he said, carving the roast with surgical precision. A chance to secure our legacy for generations. But it requires a united front, all our land working in concert. What a coincidence, I said, taking a sip of water. That sounds like a problem for the sole heir. Andrew's fork clattered against his plate. Don't be difficult, Louisa. What's your price? Father's offer was more than fair. We can even increase it. Just name a number so we can put this foolishness behind us. This was the bribery I'd been waiting for. Not a suitcase of cash, but an offer to buy my compliance, to reduce my 10 years of planning to a simple transaction. It's not for sale, I said simply. Everything is for sale, Andrew snapped, his face beginning to flush. Before he could continue, a quiet voice cut through the tension. Maybe she doesn't want to sell it. We all turned. It was Emerson. She was staring at her plate, but her words hung in the air like a challenge. In all the years she'd been married to my brother, I'd never heard her contradict him or my father in a family setting. She was the perfect trophy wife, beautiful, quiet, and compliant. But tonight there was a crack in her polished facade. My mother shot her a look that could freeze fire. Emerson, this is a family matter. I am family, she replied, her voice still quiet but firm. She finally looked up, and her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. There was no warmth, but there was a flicker of something that looked dangerously like understanding. The standoff was broken by Mila, who had been watching the exchange with wide, intelligent eyes. Why do you need her land, Daddy? she asked, her child's voice cutting through the adult tension with unnerving clarity. "You're always on the phone anyway." The question landed like a grenade in the centre of the table. My mother gasped. My father looked thunderous. The simple, honest observation from a 10-year-old had exposed the truth of it all. This wasn't about family. It was about Andrew's greed. "Mila, that is enough," Reginald boomed. "Go to your room." Mila's face fell, but she slid off her chair without another word. As she passed behind me, her small hand brushed my arm for just a second. A silent, fleeting gesture of solidarity. Her exit shattered the last of Andrew's composure. He slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "You see what you're doing?" he screamed at me, his face a mask of fury. "You're poisoning everyone. You're destroying our legacy." The room fell silent, the echo of his shout hanging in the air. I calmly picked up my wineglass, the deep red liquid swirling gently. I took a slow, deliberate sip, holding his enraged gaze over the rim. "I'm preserving mine." The day after the disastrous dinner, the official letter arrived. It was from a high-powered law firm I'd never heard of, delivered by courier. The language was dense with legal jargon, but the message was simple. They were representing my father and were prepared to file a suit to force a partition sale of my land, citing an obscure easement clause from the original 1920 survey. It was a scare tactic, a flimsy one, but expensive and designed to bleed me dry in legal fees. "It's bullshit, and they know it," Jailer said, looking over the letter in my office. The subsequent deeds and zoning laws from the last century nullify that clause. But it's an aggressive opening move. Reginald isn't asking any more. He's trying to break you. "Let him try," I said, tossing the letter onto my desk. "He's used to buying his way out of problems. He doesn't know how to fight someone who isn't motivated by money." Jailer gave me a sharp look. "What are you motivated by, Lou?" I didn't answer right away. I walked to the window, looking down at the bustling street below. My father thought my decision to remain single was a personal failing, a sad, barren choice that made me less of a woman. He had no idea it was a calculated act of self-preservation, a choice I made 12 years ago because of him. His name was Hank. He was a history teacher, kind and funny, with a laugh that made me feel like the sun was shining just for me. He didn't care about my family's money or their legacy. He cared about me. We were talking about marriage, looking at houses. I was 26 and stupidly, blissfully happy. Then I brought him to meet my parents. The memory is burned into my mind. We were in the same dining room as the other night. Hank was trying his best, talking about his passion for teaching, while my father watched him with the cold appraisal of a man inspecting livestock. After dinner, Reginald asked to speak with me alone in his study. "He's a teacher," my father said, as if the word itself were an insult. He was standing by the fireplace, swirling a brandy. "Yes, he's a wonderful one," I said, my defences already rising. "His father was a mechanic, his mother a secretary. They are common people, Louisa. They are good people." He took a long sip of his drink, his eyes hard. "This family did not get where it is by marrying for affection. We marry for stability, for legacy. This man cannot provide for you in the manner to which you are accustomed. He has nothing to offer. He is not husband material." "I love him," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was trying to suppress. "That should be enough." "Love is a luxury for other families," he said dismissively. "It is not for us. If you marry this man, you will be making a grave mistake. You will be cut off. Do you understand me?" It wasn't just the money. It was the threat of complete and total exile. He would have turned my mother against me, Andrew, everyone. He would have erased me. 2 weeks later, my father's private investigator delivered a dossier to Hank's school principal containing an exaggerated and twisted account of a minor bar fight Hank had been in during college. It was nothing, but it was enough. An anonymous, concerned parent complaint was filed. Hank was put on administrative leave during the investigation. His reputation was smeared. My father never admitted it, but I knew. He had shown me exactly how far he would go to control my life. I could fight him and lose both Hank and my family, or I could surrender. I broke off the engagement. I told Hank I wasn't ready, that I'd made a mistake. I broke his heart to save him from my father's poison. And in that moment, I made a vow. I would never again let a man, be it a husband or my father, have that kind of power over me. My career became my shield. My independence became my sovereignty. The buzz of my office intercom pulled me back to the present. My assistant's voice was hesitant. "Louisa, there's a letter for you. It was slipped under the door. No postage, no return address." I went to the reception area. It was a plain white envelope with my name typed on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one typed sentence. "You're not the only one with secrets." The typed words on the page felt like a cold stone in my hand. "You're not the only one with secrets." My first thought was Scarlett. My nosy cousin lived for drama and was loyal to Andrew. A vague threat like this was her style. My second thought was my mother. It was colder, more calculating, a warning shot to remind me that she knew things I didn't. "It's a power play," I told Jayla the next morning, sliding the letter across my desk. "Someone wants me off balance." "Or," Jayla countered, tapping the paper, "someone is trying to help you. The word is secrets, plural, not your secret. It reads like a hint, not a threat. They're telling you to look for leverage." Leverage. The word echoed in my mind. My father's legal threat was a frontal assault. This felt different, subversive. Jayla was right. What secrets did my family have that I didn't know about? I thought back, trying to find a loose thread. My mind kept returning to that day in my father's study 10 years ago, when Andrew was handed control of the family portfolio. The transition had been messy, rushed. My father wanted me out of the family business so quickly that the paperwork had been a flurry of last-minute signatures and overnighted documents. As an attorney, I keep everything. That night, I went home and dove into my encrypted digital archives, pulling up the files from that specific week. I sifted through dozens of documents until I found the one I was looking for. The authorization for the sale of a block of municipal bonds to fund a high-risk tech startup Andrew was obsessed with. It was a terrible financial decision, one I had vocally opposed. The investment had tanked within 6 months, costing the family a significant amount of money, a fact that was quickly and quietly swept under the rug. The authorization required 2 signatures, the primary portfolio manager, Andrew, and a secondary family trustee. My mother, Kennedy, held that position. I zoomed in on the signature line. Kennedy Perkins. It was her name, but it wasn't her hand. My mother's signature was a graceful, looping script. This was jagged, hurried, the K too sharp, the P too aggressive. It looked a lot like Andrew's. On its own, it was just a suspicion. But then I found the email. A week after the disastrous investment failed, my mother had sent a short, clipped message to Andrew. "Your father is furious about the Red Leaf investment. I've handled it for now, but do not let something like this happen again." She knew. She knew he'd lost the money, and she knew he'd likely forged her name to do it. She hadn't been a victim. She'd been his accomplice, covering for the golden sun while I was being pushed out for not having a husband. I copied everything to a secure drive and closed my laptop, my heart pounding with a cold, clear rage. I now had a loaded gun, but I waited. 2 days later, I got a call from an unlisted number. It was Emerson. "Can you meet?" she whispered, her voice strained. "Please, just for coffee. Andrew thinks I'm at the salon." We met at a small, anonymous cafe downtown. She looked exhausted, the perfect facade from the dinner party completely gone. She slid into the booth and didn't waste time. "I sent the letter," she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "I'm sorry if it scared you. I didn't know what else to do." I stayed silent, letting her talk. "He's out of control, Louisa. The money, the pressure from your father. He's becoming a monster. He talks about ruining you, about burying you in legal fees until you have nothing left. After that dinner, when I saw the look in your eyes, you're the only one who has ever stood up to them." Her own eyes filled with tears. "He forged her signature on that Red Leaf deal years ago. I found the old bank statements in his desk. I know she covered for him. If it comes to it, if you need a witness, I'll testify. I can't let him do this to you. I can't let Myla grow up thinking this is normal." Her offer was a bigger weapon than the documents themselves. A daughter-in-law, a wife, willing to burn the whole house down. I drove back to my office, my mind racing. The pieces were all there, a perfect checkmate scenario forming in my head. As I walked in, my assistant handed me a message. "A Mr. Quinn Santos called for you, said it was urgent. He's a developer." I recognized the name. He was a major player, a rival of Sterling Developments. I returned the call immediately. His voice was smooth and direct. "Ms. Perkins, I'll get straight to the point. My firm is putting together a competing bid for the North County project. Your 10 acres are the key to a much more efficient access plan than Sterling has proposed. It makes our entire bid more attractive to the council." "My land isn't for sale," I said, my standard reply. "Everything is for sale, Ms. Perkins. My offer is double the current market appraisal for your parcel, cash, but there's a condition. The deal has to be signed and filed before the end of month council meeting. That gives you 9 days. I hung up the phone and stared at the county map on my wall. The offer was staggering, life-changing money, enough to walk away from my family, my past, and never look back. It was the smart play, the profitable one, but it wasn't punishment. I stood there for a long time, caught between two futures, maximum profit or maximum punishment. I chose punishment. Quinn Santos's offer gave me the one thing I needed more than money, a deadline. With the council meeting looming, my father's slow-moving lawsuit was useless. He needed my land now, not after a year of legal battles. I instructed my lawyer to arrange a final settlement meeting. I gave them a time and a place, my office, my turf. They arrived together, a united front of arrogance and entitlement. My father, Andrew, and their bulldog lawyer, Mr. Gable. They walked in like they owned the place, expecting me to finally cave. My mother wasn't there. She preferred to keep her hands clean, to remain above the fray while still reaping the benefits. Jayla sat beside me, a silent pillar of support. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Mr. Gable began, opening his briefcase. "My clients are prepared to make a final, generous offer for your parcel. Consider it a gesture of goodwill to resolve this family matter swiftly. I'm not here to discuss a sale," I said, my voice calm and even. Reginald scoffed. "Then why are we here, Louisa, to waste more of our time with your theatrics?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I nodded to Jayla. She dimmed the lights and turned on the large monitor on the wall. The first image that appeared was a high-resolution scan of the Redleaf investment authorization, my mother's forged signature circled in red. Andrew went rigid. My father stared at the screen, his brow furrowed in confusion. 10 years ago, I began, my voice cutting through the silence, Andrew made a reckless investment that cost this family a substantial amount of money. To bypass the proper channels, he forged his mother's signature on the authorization documents. "This is slander!" Andrew sputtered, his face turning blotchy. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" I clicked to the next slide. It was the email from my mother. "I've handled it for now, but do not let something like this happen again." My father read the words, then slowly turned his head to look at Andrew. The dawning horror on his face was more satisfying than any amount of money. He had built his entire world on the myth of his perfect son, the worthy heir. That myth was now crumbling before his eyes. "This is a private family matter," Mr. Gable interjected, trying to regain control. "It has no bearing on the issue at hand." "On the contrary," I said, my voice like ice, "it has every bearing. Forgery is a felony, so is knowingly concealing it. If this information were to be made public, say, in a deposition for a lawsuit, it would not only trigger an SEC investigation into the family's finances, but the reputational damage would be catastrophic. Sterling Developments might get nervous about partnering with a family facing federal fraud charges. The room was utterly silent. I had them. The lawsuit, the threats, the condescension, it was all built on the assumption that I was powerless. I had just shown them the true meaning of power. "And just in case you think I'm bluffing," I continued, turning to Andrew, "Emerson has already agreed to testify about what she knows. She's tired of the lies. That was the final blow." Andrew looked like I had physically struck him. The mention of his wife turning on him shattered his last shred of composure. He shot out of his chair, his face contorted with rage. "You bitch! You're trying to ruin me!" He lunged across the table, but my father, for the first time in his life, acted. He grabbed Andrew's arm, his own face pale with shock and fury. "Sit down, Andrew, now." Andrew collapsed back into his chair, defeated. I let the weight of it all settle in the room. Then I laid out my terms. "Here is my one and only offer," I said, looking directly at my father. "You will drop your lawsuit, you will dissolve the current succession plan, and you will sign over a 50% non-transferable ownership stake in the entire Perkins estate to me. Not to my LLC, but to me, Louisa Perkins, personally." Mr. Gable gasped. "That's preposterous." "Is it?" I countered, "because my other option is to sign a deal with Quinn Santos before the council meeting. I walk away a very wealthy woman, and you are left with a landlocked, unsellable property and a legacy that's about to be tarnished by a very public scandal. The choice is yours. You have 24 hours. I stood up, signalling the end of the meeting. As they were filing out, their shoulders slumped in defeat, my father paused at the door. He looked older than I had ever seen him, the bluster and arrogance stripped away, leaving only a hollowed-out old man. He turned to me, his voice quiet and gutted. "Who taught you to be this ruthless?" I met his gaze without flinching. "You did." They folded. Of course they did. They had no other move to make. The 24 hours passed in a blur of frantic calls between lawyers. My father tried to negotiate, to salvage some piece of his pride, but I held firm, 50%, no less. The final signing was scheduled to take place at the County Municipal Building, an hour before the council meeting where the development bids would be presented. It was a public space, neutral ground, a place where my family's brand of private intimidation wouldn't work. The atmosphere in the sterile conference room was thick with resentment. My father, Andrew, and I sat on one side of a long table, our respective lawyers on the other. My mother was there, a silent, statuesque figure of disapproval standing by the window. She hadn't spoken a word to me since the meeting in my office. The documents were laid out before us, a stack of papers that would rewrite the Perkins legacy. As my father picked up the pen, his hand trembled. He looked across the table at me, his eyes pleading for a last-minute reprieve, a flicker of the dutiful daughter he had discarded. I offered him nothing but cool, professional silence. He signed. Then Andrew, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle pulsed in his cheek. Finally, it was my turn. My signature was clean and steady. It was done. I was now half owner of the land they had tried to deny me. Just as the lawyers began gathering the copies, Andrew's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and a strange, malicious smile spread across his face. He stood up and walked over to me, leaning in close. "You think you've won," he whispered, his voice low and venomous. "I just got a text from Scarlett. She saw Hank at the grocery store last week. He's back in town, married, 2 kids, looks happy. How does it feel to know you threw away your own happiness for nothing?" He expected me to crumble, to show pain. It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort to wound me. But the woman he was trying to hurt, the 26-year-old girl who cried for a week after that breakup, didn't exist anymore. "I'm happy for him," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "He deserved a good life. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a council meeting to attend." I walked out, leaving him standing there, his final pathetic arrow having missed its mark. The council meeting was a packed, formal affair. The representatives from Sterling Developments gave their presentation, followed by Quinn Santos's team. When it was over, I was given the floor as the co-owner of the Perkins estate. I walked to the podium and announced that the Perkins family had decided to withdraw our property from consideration for any large-scale commercial development at this time. A murmur went through the room. The Sterling reps looked stunned. Quinn just nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile on his face. From the back of the room, I heard a commotion. I turned to see my father clutching his chest, his face a ghastly shade of grey. He collapsed into his chair, gasping for air. My mother screamed. Paramedics were called, and the room descended into chaos. In the midst of it all, my mother pushed through the crowd toward me, her face a mask of fury and grief. "Are you happy now?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You've ruined everything. You've killed your father." I just stood there, watching them wheel him out on a stretcher. I felt a strange and unsettling numbness. This wasn't the victory I had imagined. There was no triumphant feeling, just a vast, hollow emptiness. Later that night, Jayla and Quinn met me for a drink. They tried to celebrate, toasting to my victory, but my heart wasn't in it. "You did it, Lou," Jayla said, squeezing my hand. "You took back what was yours." But what was mine? I drove to the family estate, using my new key to let myself into the sprawling, empty house. The place was silent, haunted by the ghosts of a family I had just systematically dismantled. My father was in a hospital bed, his future uncertain. My mother would never forgive me. My brother was disgraced. Emerson had already packed her and Mila's bags and left. I won. I had the land, the power, the legacy. I had gotten my revenge. I stood alone in the grand foyer, surrounded by portraits of my ancestors, the silence pressing in on me. I won. So why do I feel so lost? That feeling of being lost didn't vanish overnight. It lingered for weeks, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my new reality. My father survived the heart attack, but it left him diminished, a frail man stripped of his bluster. He was moved to a long-term care facility. My mother visited him daily, her duty unwavering, but she refused to see or speak to me. Andrew, facing financial ruin and a pending divorce, retreated into a bitter, resentful silence. The family I had fought so hard to be recognised by had simply ceased to exist. I didn't sell the land to Quinn Santos. The victory would have felt cheap, transactional. Instead, I spent my days walking the property, the 10 acres I had bought in spite, and the 50 I had won in battle. The land was beautiful but neglected, choked with overgrown brush and fallen trees. My father had seen it as a static symbol of his legacy, something to be possessed. He never saw it as something to be nurtured. One afternoon, Emerson called. She and Mila were staying in a small rental in the next town over, finalising the divorce. "Mila wants to see the horses," she said, her voice hesitant. The Perkins estate had stables that had been unused for years. "She keeps asking. I told her I didn't think it was a good idea, but—" "Bring her," I said immediately, "whenever you want." They came the next day. While Mila, now 11, explored the dusty stables with the wide-eyed wonder of a child rediscovering a forgotten playground, Emerson and I sat on the porch of the main house. "I heard about your father," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Louisa." "He made his choices," I replied, the words feeling true for the first time. "So did I." We sat in a comfortable silence, watching her daughter. It wasn't the tense, charged silence of a Perkins family dinner, but something new, something peaceful. That visit became a regular thing. Soon, Jayla started joining us on weekends. We'd bring food, work in the overgrown gardens, and talk. We weren't just three women, we were architects, drawing up new blueprints on the ruins of the old. The idea came to me during one of those afternoons. It started small. I hired a local crew to clear the land, not for development, but for restoration. We repaired the stables, tilled the gardens, and fixed the fences. I used my legal expertise to set up a trust, funded by the sale of some of the family's less strategic financial assets, which I now co-managed. The trust's purpose was twofold. First, it would turn the bulk of the estate into a community-run agricultural project, leasing plots of land at low cost to local families and new farmers. Second, it would establish a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in business, law, and finance. I named it after my grandmother, a woman whose own ambitions had been stifled by the same patriarchal legacy I had just dismantled. Mila thrived there. She spent every moment she could at the estate, learning about the horses and helping in the gardens. I saw in her the same fierce curiosity and independence I had at her age. But this time it was being encouraged, not suppressed. Quinn Santos called me a few months after the council meeting. He wasn't calling about business. He'd heard what I was doing with the land and was intrigued. We had dinner, then another. It was slow, easy. There were no expectations, no legacies to uphold. It was just two people getting to know each other. It wasn't a storybook ending with a handsome prince, but something far more real and infinitely more valuable, a partnership of equals. I saw my father one last time. I went to the care facility, unannounced. He was sitting in a wheelchair by a window, looking out at a manicured lawn. He looked small. "The land," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "What have you done with it?" "I'm making it grow," I told him. He just shook his head, a flicker of the old disappointment in his eyes. He didn't understand. He never would. I said my goodbyes and walked away, feeling no anger, no bitterness, only a quiet sense of closure. When the land was theirs, they let it rot. When it became mine, I made it bloom. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about building something better in the space they had left behind. You get nothing until you earn it. I earned it.
The text from my mother-in-law arrived 3 days before the annual Whitfield family portrait of agony. It was a single, sterile sentence that landed with the soft thud of a final nail being hammered into a coffin. Just wear something neutral, dear. For context, my name is Yasmin. I'm 33, and for the last 7 years, I've been married to Rowan Whitfield, a man I love despite the family that came with him. The Whitfields don't just exist, they perform. Their lives are a carefully curated gallery of success, tradition, and impeccable taste, and the curator-in-chief is Naomi Whitfield, my 62-year-old mother-in-law. Naomi doesn't just suggest, she dictates. She doesn't just host parties, she stages events. And every year, she orchestrates a family portrait that gets printed on heavy, cream-coloured cardstock and sent out to a list of people who are meant to be impressed. For 7 years, I've tried to fit into her frame. I've endured the subtle digs about my eclectic, read, not expensive enough, taste in art, the gentle corrections on which fork to use, and the tight, bloodless smiles that never quite reached her eyes. I was the foreign element, the splash of untitled modern art in her gallery of classical portraits. This year, the theme was apparently pastels. I only knew this because a second text message buzzed my phone just moments after Naomi's. It was from Esme, Rowan's 29-year-old cousin and my sole ally in this pristine battlefield. Her text was a screenshot of a group chat titled Whitfield Pastels 2023. The chat was a flurry of messages from Rowan's older sister, Tessa, and his younger sister, Audrey, debating shades of mint green and baby blue. Tessa: Mom says my rose-coloured dress is perfect. Audrey: Ooh, I found a lilac top that will make my highlights pop. Is that okay, Mom? Naomi: Lovely girls. Just make sure the tones don't clash. We want harmony. There were 15 people in that group chat. My husband was in it. His father, Alfred, was in it. Even Tessa's husband, Zechariah, who actively avoids this stuff, was in it. I was not. My instructions came via a private, dismissive text. I wasn't part of the harmony. I was the background noise, the beige wall against which their perfect pastels would pop. Just wear something neutral, dear. The word dear was the most insulting part. It was a pat on the head, a verbal dismissal meant to soften a blow that was designed to be sharp. In previous years, I would have been hurt. I might have cried a little in the shower, then spent 2 days anxiously searching for a shade of beige that was sufficiently self-effacing. I would have shown up, smiled weakly for the camera, and died a little inside, all to keep the peace for Rowan. But as I stared at the 2 texts, the secret coordination and the public command, something inside me didn't break. It solidified. It was the quiet, cold click of a lock seating into place. The part of me that had tried so hard to earn a spot in their perfect picture finally gave up. If I was going to be pushed into the background, I decided I was going to be the most memorable background they had ever seen. 7 years of being treated like a temporary guest in my own family. 7 years of my ideas being ignored. My career as a graphic designer being called a cute hobby, and my presence being tolerated instead of welcomed. It all coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. Naomi wanted me to blend in. She wanted me to be a non-entity, a human swatch of taupe. I looked at my phone again, the pastel group chat on one side, my solo instructions on the other. Harmony. That's what she wanted. A perfect pastel lie, captured for posterity. Fine. I could do neutral, but my version of neutral wouldn't be passive. It would be active. It would be a statement. I walked into my home office, the one Rowan had helped me set up, filled with my art and my work. It was the only space in our life that felt truly mine, untouched by the Whitfield aesthetic. I sat in my chair, the familiar hum of the computer a comforting sound. I opened my laptop, launched my design software, and created a new file. The blank canvas stared back at me, a perfect, neutral void, and I started to design. The cursor blinked on the blank canvas, a rhythmic, mocking pulse. My plan for the shirt was still a nebulous cloud of anger and ink, but the fuel for it was crystal clear. It was built from 7 years of moments, just like the group chat incident. Moments that, on their own, seemed small and petty, but when stitched together, formed a heavy shroud of exclusion. I remembered our first Christmas as a married couple. I'd spent weeks searching for a thoughtful, personal gift for Naomi, finally settling on a rare first-edition book by her favorite author. She'd opened it, given it a cursory glance, and said, "How quaint," before placing it on a side table where it was quickly buried under discarded wrapping paper. Later, I saw her gushing over the cashmere throw Tessa had given her, the exact same one she'd received the year before. It wasn't about the gift. It was about the giver. My mind drifted to another memory, sharper this time. It was about 4 years ago, during Alfred's 61st birthday party at their cavernous home. The night was winding down, and I was in the hallway, looking for my coat. Through the slightly ajar door of Alfred's study, I heard Naomi's voice, a low, urgent hiss. "We agreed, Alfred. Absolute silence." Alfred's reply was a tired rumble. "It's been 30 years, Naomi. What does it matter now?" "It matters because of our family's reputation," she'd snapped back. "It matters because of Rowan. We will not have the name Rogers spoken in this house. Ever. He is your son. That is the only truth that matters." The name stuck with me. Rogers. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. At the time, I'd dismissed it as some old business squabble, another piece of Whitfield history I wasn't privy to. But now, sitting in the glow of my monitor, the memory felt different. It felt like a key. The memory of that argument connected to a more recent one. Just last month, we'd all been at one of Naomi's mandatory Sunday dinners. I was seated next to Zechariah, Tessa's husband. He was a decent enough guy who usually coped with these events by making a beeline for the expensive scotch Alfred kept stocked. By the time dessert was served, he was 3 glasses deep and unusually chatty. Tessa was at the other end of the table, locked in a sycophantic conversation with her mother, so I saw my opening. I kept my tone light. "You know, I was thinking the other day, I've never heard much about your family's old friends, the ones from before I came along." Zechariah swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "That's because most of them were boring suits." He slurred slightly. "Or Naomi scared them off." "No one interesting? No dramatic fallouts?" I probed gently. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, there was drama. Always is with the Whitfields. They just bury it deep." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You want to know a secret, Yasmin? A real one?" I leaned in, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Always." He glanced down the table to make sure his wife was still occupied. "It's not my place to say, but Rowan's not who he thinks he is. None of this is what it looks like." Before I could ask what he meant, Tessa called his name, her voice sharp with annoyance, and the moment was gone. He clammed up immediately, shaking his head as if to clear it. Now, in my office, the pieces clicked together. Rogers. Silence. Rowan's not who he thinks he is. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I minimized my design software and opened a web browser. I started with simple searches. Alfred Whitfield Business Partners, Rogers. I found a few mentions of a Rogers capital firm from the 80s, but nothing concrete. Then I tried a new search. Naomi Whitfield Social Circle, Rogers 1980s. I scrolled through grainy scans of old society pages and charity event announcements. And then I found it. An article from a local business journal dated 1987, featuring rising stars in the city's financial scene. The photo was black and white, but the faces were clear. A younger, beaming Alfred stood next to another man. The caption read, "Alfred Whitfield and partner Lucian Rogers celebrate the successful launch of their new venture." I stared at the man named Lucian Rogers. He had a strong jaw, dark, deep-set eyes, and a smile that was slightly crooked, a feature I had always found endearing in my husband. My breath caught in my throat. I opened another tab and found a recent photo of Rowan from his company's website. I placed the two windows side by side. The resemblance was absolute. It wasn't just a passing similarity, it was a blueprint. The shape of the eyes, the line of the mouth, the way his hair grew at the temples. Rowan, my 35-year-old husband, was the spitting image of a man named Lucian Rogers, and I was suddenly very sure that Alfred Whitfield was not his father. The side-by-side images of Rowan and Lucian Rogers burned on my screen. I felt a dizzying mix of vindication and nausea. For the next 2 days, I was a ghost in my own home, my mind a frantic mess of timelines and whispered conversations. The family photo shoot was tomorrow, and the half-finished design on my laptop felt like a ticking bomb. Rowan noticed my distraction. He's a placid man by nature, a calm sea to my often stormy waters, but he's not unobservant. He found me staring blankly at the kitchen wall, a cold cup of coffee in my hands. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. He put his hand on my shoulder. "You've been quiet since Mom sent that text about the photos." I forced a smile. "Just stressed. You know how I get before these things." He sighed, a weary sound that told me he knew exactly what I meant. "I know. It's a lot. The whole family gets tense." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a nervous gesture I now saw in a completely different light. It was a mirror image of a mannerism I'd seen in the old photo of Lucian. "Just try to ignore it. For me?" The plea in his voice was genuine. He hated the conflict. Always had. He was the family's designated peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over Naomi's sharp edges and Alfred's stony silences. But his nervousness seemed deeper this time. It wasn't just about family stress. It was a specific, pointed anxiety about this photo shoot. Zechariah's drunken words echoed in my head. Rowan's not who he thinks he is. Or maybe he was. Maybe he knew, or at least suspected, and lived in quiet terror of the truth ever coming out. I couldn't ask him. Not yet. Confronting him would make it real for us, and I wasn't ready for that. I needed proof. My next call was to Esme. "I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice low as I stepped out onto our back patio. "A weird one." "My favorite kind," she replied, her voice crackling with amusement. "What fresh hell is Aunt Naomi putting you through now?" "It's bigger than the pastel apocalypse," I said. "I need you to look through some of the old family photo albums, the ones from before Rowan was born and the year after." "Okay. Looking for what, exactly?" "Bad 80s fashion." "I'm looking for gaps," I explained. "Specifically, gaps involving a man named Lucian Rogers. He was Alfred's business partner." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Esme spoke again, her tone had changed. Lucian Rogers. Wow, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. My mom used to mention him. Said there was some kind of accident. He just disappeared from their lives. I need to know when, I pressed. And I need to know if Naomi ever traveled with him. Check old calendars, planners, anything you can find in your grandparents' attic. Esme was the family's unofficial historian, mostly because her own parents were pack rats. She agreed without hesitation. Her curiosity piqued. She was as tired of the Whitfield facade as I was. While Esme dug through dusty boxes, I went back to the public record. Birth certificates were sealed, but travel manifests weren't. Not from that long ago. It took hours of tedious searching through digitized archives, but I found it. A flight itinerary from May 1987 for a 2-week business conference in Switzerland. The passenger list included Alfred Whitfield, Lucian Rogers, and Naomi Whitfield. Rowan was born in February 1988, exactly 9 months later. Alfred had flown home after the first week for an emergency meeting. Naomi and Lucian had stayed for the full 2 weeks. A few hours later, Esme called back, her voice a hushed, excited whisper. "You're not going to believe this. I found Grandma's old day planner from 87. The whole month of May is blocked out for trip with Alfred and Lucian. But then there's a note in June that just says, Elle gone. And Yasmin. I found a photo. It's from that trip. It's just Naomi and Lucian standing on a balcony. They're not standing like business associates." My stomach twisted. It was all there. The timeline, the opportunity, the whispered secrets. The visual evidence of Rowan's face was compelling, but I needed something irrefutable, something scientific. That night, after Rowan was asleep, I crept into our bathroom. My hands were shaking as I took his toothbrush from its holder and carefully plucked a strand of dental floss from the dispenser he'd used earlier. I sealed them in a small plastic baggie. The next morning, I did another search, this time for genealogy websites. Lucian Rogers, it turned out, had a public profile. Like many people his age, he'd submitted his DNA years ago out of curiosity. His results linked to a distant cousin who managed the family tree. His genetic markers were right there, available for comparison. I found a lab online that specialized in discrete DNA testing. They could run a paternity comparison using the genetic information from a public database against a sample provided on an item like dental floss. It was expensive and would take a rush order to get back before the photo shoot, but I didn't care. I filled out the online form with trembling fingers, using an anonymous email address and a prepaid credit card. As I sealed the floss in the mailer, a wave of guilt washed over me. This was a monumental betrayal of Rowan's trust, but it was a betrayal in the service of a truth that had been stolen from him his entire life. Naomi had built her perfect family on a foundation of lies. I was just digging down to see how deep they went. The email arrived the morning of the photo shoot. I'd been obsessively refreshing my anonymous inbox since dawn, my stomach churning with a toxic cocktail of dread and anticipation. The subject line was clinical, DNA comparison results. Case 734B. My hand hovered over the trackpad, a tremor running up my arm. This was the point of no return. Clicking this email would transform my suspicions into facts, and facts required action. I took a deep breath and opened it. The report was brief, a simple PDF attachment filled with genetic markers and percentages. I scanned past the scientific jargon, my eyes searching for the one sentence that mattered. There it was, at the bottom of the page, in stark, unequivocal black and white. Based on the provided sample and the public genetic profile of Lucian Rogers, the probability of paternity is 99.8%. I leaned back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. 99.8%. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a certainty. Rowan, the man I had built a life with, was the son of a man he likely didn't even remember. Alfred Whitfield, the stoic, emotionally distant man who had raised him, was not his father. And Naomi. Naomi had orchestrated this lie for 35 years, wrapping it in layers of wealth and propriety, all to maintain her perfect image. A wave of cold fury washed over me, so intense it felt like ice in my veins. This wasn't just about me being excluded from a group chat anymore. This was about a lifetime of deception that had shaped the man I loved. It was about Alfred, who had been either a fool or a willing accomplice. It was about Tessa and who knows who else, all of them complicit in the silence. My first instinct was to run into the living room, shove the report in Rowan's face, and watch the world burn. But what would that accomplish? It would be his word against his mother's, and Naomi was a master manipulator. She would twist it, deny it, and paint me as a hysterical, malicious outsider trying to tear her family apart. The family, including Rowan, had been conditioned to believe her for decades. I needed something more. I needed a public detonation. I needed undeniable proof delivered in a way no one could ignore. I turned back to my laptop, my resolve hardening from a liquid suspicion into solid steel. I opened the design file I had started 2 days ago. The anger that had been simmering was now a focused, creative fire. I chose a simple, soft grey t-shirt as my canvas, the perfect shade of neutral. I selected a clean, bold font, the kind used for public service announcements. It felt appropriate. The design was simple but devastating. On the front, in large letters, I typed, "This is what happens when you hide the truth." Underneath, in a slightly smaller font, I added the payload, "Hi, Dad." And next to that, I placed a thick, unmissable black arrow pointing sharply to the right. When I stood next to Rowan, that arrow would be aimed directly at his heart. I stared at the design on the screen. It was petty. It was theatrical. It was a weapon designed to inflict maximum emotional damage in the most public way possible. And it was exactly what Naomi deserved. She had curated every detail of their lives for the camera, and I was going to give her a picture she could never unsee. I sent the file to a local print shop that offered same-day service, paid the rush fee, and told them I'd pick it up in an hour. As I was closing my laptop, the door to my office creaked open. Rowan stood there, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, a small, tired smile on his face. He glanced at my screen just before it went dark. "Working on a last-minute project?" "Something like that," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He walked over and set the mug on my desk, his eyes lingering on the monitor. "What is that?" he asked, pointing to the fleeting image he'd caught. "The thing with the arrow." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I looked him straight in the eye, my expression as placid and unreadable as I could make it. I gave him the word his mother had given me. "Neutral." The photo shoot was at a botanical garden, one of Naomi's favorite haunts. It was a place of manicured perfection, where nature was tamed, trimmed, and forced into pleasing arrangements. It was the perfect backdrop for her family. We arrived to find her in her element, directing the photographer, Samantha, with the precision of a 4-star general. No, the light is better over here, by the weeping willows. Alfred, stand a little straighter. Tessa, your dress is a beautiful rose. You should be closer to the front. Audrey, darling, that lilac is divine on you. Everyone was a sea of soft, coordinated colours. Tessa, 38, and her mother's heir apparent in all things judgmental, wore a flowing rose-coloured dress. Her husband, Zechariah, looked deeply uncomfortable in a mint-green polo shirt. Audrey, the 22-year-old wannabe influencer, preened in a lilac top, taking selfies while she waited. Alfred, 65, was stoic as ever in a pale blue button-down, his face a mask of polite indifference. Rowan, bless his oblivious heart, wore the sky-blue sweater his mother had picked out for him. And then there was me. I was wearing a plain, dark grey zip-up hoodie over my custom-printed T-shirt. I felt the familiar sting of Naomi's disapproval as her eyes swept over me. "Yasmin, dear," she said, her voice dripping with strained sweetness. "I know I said neutral, but that is a bit drab, don't you think?" "It's comfortable," I replied, offering her a bland smile. "Don't worry, I won't ruin the shot." She gave a tight nod and turned back to her masterpiece. "All right, everyone, let's get into position. Tallest in the back, please." Of course. I was shuffled to the back row, positioned directly behind Rowan, slightly to his left. Perfect. The arrow would have an unobstructed path. Esme, who had arrived in a butter-yellow sundress, caught my eye from the side and gave me a subtle, questioning look. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know what. I saw her discreetly lift her phone, pretending to check a message. "Okay, beautiful family," Samantha, the photographer, chirped from behind her tripod. "Big smiles, everyone." "On the count of 3. Naomi stood at the center of the group, a queen surveying her court. She adjusted Alfred's collar, smoothed a wrinkle on Audrey's top, and beamed with proprietary pride. This was her creation, this perfect pastel family. 1, Samantha began. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My hands felt cold and slick. This was it. No turning back. 2. I reached for the zipper on my hoodie. The metal tab felt like ice against my fingertips. I saw Rowan shift in front of me, sensing my movement. He probably thought I was just getting comfortable. 3! The first click of the camera shutter echoed in the quiet garden. In one smooth, deliberate motion, I pulled the zipper down. The grey hoodie fell open, revealing the soft, lighter grey T-shirt beneath. The black letters stood out in stark, brutal contrast to the sea of gentle pastels. For a second, nothing happened. The photographer, focused on her lens, kept shooting. Click. Click. Then Naomi's eyes, which had been scanning her family for any imperfections, landed on me. Her perfectly painted smile didn't just falter, it collapsed. Her mouth fell open, a silent, horrified "oh." The colour drained from her face, leaving her foundation looking like a chalky mask. Her reaction was a ripple that spread through the group. Tessa's eyes followed her mother's gaze, and she let out a sharp, scandalized gasp. Alfred, ever stoic, simply frowned in confusion, not yet able to read the words from his angle. But Rowan saw it. He must have felt the sudden, icy tension behind him. He turned his head slightly, his eyes finding mine before dropping to my chest. I watched his face as he processed the words, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened in dawning horror as he read the second line and understood the arrow's implication. His face, which had been arranged in a pleasant, camera-ready smile, contorted into a mask of shock and betrayal. Click, click, click. The camera kept firing, capturing every millisecond of the implosion. It documented the precise moment the carefully constructed Whitfield facade shattered into a million pieces. The world seemed to slow down, each click of the shutter punctuating the silent, spreading chaos. Samantha, the photographer, was in the zone, her professional instincts overriding any social awareness. She was paid to capture the moment, and this was certainly a moment. Click, click. A perfect, horrifying series of images, the family frozen in various stages of disbelief. Alfred was the last to understand. His gaze shifted from Naomi's ashen face to my shirt. He squinted, his 65-year-old eyes taking a moment to focus on the words. I watched him read the first line, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. Then his eyes dropped to the second line. "Hi, Dad." He followed the arrow. It pointed directly at his son, his presumed son. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, grey pallor. His stoicism finally cracked, replaced by a profound, gut-wrenching confusion. He looked from Rowan to Naomi, his expression a silent, desperate question. Rowan turned fully toward me, his face a maelstrom of emotions. Shock, hurt, and a terrifying glimmer of understanding. "Yasmin! What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "What did you do?" "I wore something neutral," I said, my own voice eerily calm. "Stop this! Stop this right now!" Naomi finally found her voice. It was a shrill, panicked shriek that was utterly alien to her usually controlled tone. She lunged forward, her hands reaching for me as if to physically cover the words on my shirt. "Samantha, stop taking pictures!" But Samantha was already lowering her camera, her face a mask of bewildered apology. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Whitfield. You didn't say stop." In the ensuing chaos, no one noticed Esme. Standing off to the side, she had her phone held steady, its camera lens a small, dark eye, recording not the posed portrait, but the raw, unfiltered implosion. She captured Naomi's lunge, Rowan's devastated expression, and Alfred's slow-motion crumbling. Tessa rushed to her mother's side. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed at me, her face contorted with rage. "You psycho! You're trying to ruin this family!" "The family was already ruined," I said, my gaze fixed on Rowan. "This is just turning the lights on." Zechariah, for his part, looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. He stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, the memory of his drunken confession clearly playing in his mind. He knew he was the one who had given me the final thread to pull. Alfred took a shaky step toward his wife, his voice a low, dangerous rumble I had never heard before. "Naomi, what is this shirt talking about?" Naomi stammered, her usual eloquence gone. It's nothing, Alfred. She's being cruel. She's always been jealous of this family, of what we have." But her denial was weak, her eyes darting nervously between Alfred and Rowan. The lie was too big to patch up with a simple dismissal. The truth was written on my chest, and now it was reflected in every horrified face in the garden. Rowan looked at his mother, his expression pleading. "Mom, what is she talking about?" The silence that followed was heavier than any words. It was an admission, a 35-year-old secret suffocating in the manicured air of the botanical garden. The photographer, Samantha, finally broke the spell. She looked utterly mortified, caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't understand. She nervously clutched her camera. Mrs. Whitfield? Mr. Whitfield? Should I delete these photos?" All eyes turned to me. I was the one who had lit the match. It was my call whether to try and stamp out the fire. I looked at Naomi's panicked face, at Alfred's broken one, and at Rowan, my husband, whose entire identity had just been detonated in front of a weeping willow. I felt a pang of regret, not for the act itself, but for the pain on his face. But regret wasn't going to change the truth. I met Samantha's gaze, my voice clear and steady. "Absolutely not." The days that followed the photo shoot were a blur of ringing phones and deafening silence. We left the botanical garden in separate cars. Rowan didn't speak a single word to me on the ride home. He just stared out the passenger window, his reflection a pale, ghostly mask. The moment we walked through the door, he went into the guest room and shut the door. I didn't follow. The real explosion happened at the Whitfield mansion. Esme told me about it later. Rowan had driven straight there from the garden and confronted Naomi. Alfred was there, a silent, imposing statue of betrayal. Cornered and stripped of her usual defenses, Naomi finally broke. She admitted everything: the affair with Lucian Rogers, the trip to Switzerland, the lie she had maintained for 35 years. She'd justified it, Esme said, by claiming she did it to protect the family, to give Rowan the Whitfield name and the life that came with it. Alfred didn't say a word. He just listened to his wife confess to a lifetime of deceit, then turned and walked out of the house he had shared with her for over 40 years. He didn't pack a bag. He just left. 2 days later, the first tremor hit the outside world. A 10-second video clip, grainy and shot from a distance, appeared on a local gossip blog. It was Esme's footage. It showed Naomi lunging at me, Tessa's furious face, and Rowan's look of utter devastation. The shirt wasn't legible, but the chaos was. The headline read, "Whitfield family portrait goes wildly off script." Social media lit up with speculation. Rowan was gone. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter the morning after the shoot. "I need some time to think." He didn't answer my calls or texts. For 3 days, I lived in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the final verdict on my marriage. I had won the war against Naomi, but I was terrified I had lost my husband in the process. He finally came home on the 4th night. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged a decade. He found me in the living room, sitting in the dark. "I went to see him," he said, his voice hoarse. He didn't have to say who. "Lucian. He lives 2 states over, has a family. He didn't know about me." My heart ached for him. "Rowan, I am so sorry for the way you found out." He sank onto the couch opposite me, running a hand over his face. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or was this just for them? For her?" "I was going to tell you," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I got the proof that morning. But I was so angry, Rowan. She spent 7 years making me feel small and worthless, and I knew she would deny it. I knew she would twist it and make me the villain. I needed it to be undeniable. He was quiet for a long time. I think I always knew something was wrong, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. There was always this distance with Alfred, and the way my mother would get so defensive if certain names from the past came up. I never wanted to look too closely. It was easier to pretend. We talked for hours, the first truly honest conversation we'd had in years. He was devastated, angry, and confused. He was furious with me for my methods, but he couldn't deny that I had uncovered a truth that had been poisoning him his entire life. Our marriage was broken, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't shattered beyond repair. A week later, around the time the Whitfield holiday cards were usually sent out, an email landed in the inboxes of their entire social and professional circle. The sender was Rowan Whitfield. There was no festive greeting. The subject line was simply, "The 2023 Whitfield Family Portrait." Attached was one of the photos from that day. It was the one Samantha had taken right after I unzipped my hoodie. Naomi's mouth is a perfect O of horror. Alfred looks like he's seen a ghost. And I am standing in the back, a calm, neutral spectre, with an arrow pointing at a son who has just learned the truth. Below the photo, Rowan had written a letter. It was calm, factual, and utterly devastating. He detailed the long-hidden secret of his paternity, his mother's affair, and the lifetime of lies that had defined his family. He made no excuses. He cast no blame beyond where it was due. He ended the letter with a simple, powerful statement. My wife was told to wear something neutral. Instead, she chose to wear the truth. From now on, this will be our only family tradition, the truth portrait. The fallout from Rowan's truth portrait was swift and silent. There were no public statements, no dramatic confrontations on our doorstep. Instead, the Whitfield world simply contracted. Naomi, the curator of a flawless public image, became a recluse. The society pages that once chronicled her every charity luncheon now only mentioned her absence. She lost her coveted seat as chair of the museum's fundraising board. A quiet vote was held, and a new name was announced. Her perfect image, once shattered, proved impossible to glue back together. She refused to speak to me, and her calls to Rowan went unanswered. Alfred filed for legal separation. He didn't move back into the mansion. He bought a condo in the city and began the quiet, methodical process of untangling his life from Naomi's. I saw him once, a few weeks after the email went out. We passed each other on the street. He met my eyes, and for a moment I saw not anger, but a profound, weary sadness. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, and kept walking. It wasn't forgiveness, but it felt like an acknowledgement. We were two people who had been collateral damage in Naomi's war for perfection. Our own home became a place of careful reconstruction. My relationship with Rowan was irrevocably changed. The trust between us was fractured, not by the secret itself, but by the way I had chosen to reveal it. We started seeing a therapist, a neutral third party who helped us navigate the minefield of his grief and my anger. It was hard, painful work. He was mourning the father he thought he had and grappling with the identity of a stranger who shared his DNA. I was learning that forcing accountability, even when justified, comes with its own shrapnel. My victory wasn't clean. It was stained with the pain of the person I loved most. But for the first time, Our marriage was built on a foundation of truth, however brutal. Tessa and Audrey, predictably, sided with their mother, cutting off all contact with Rowan. Zechariah sent me a single, terrified text. "I'm sorry." I never replied. Esme, on the other hand, became a fixture in our lives, a welcome presence in the quiet aftermath. The centerpiece of our new life was the photograph. Rowan had it professionally framed, not the large, ostentatious size Naomi would have chosen, but a simple, elegant 8x10. He hung it in the main hallway of our home. It was the first thing people saw when they walked in. It was a conversation starter, to say the least. Some friends would stare, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. A few asked what happened, and we told them the truth, edited for brevity. Most just averted their eyes, uncomfortable with such a raw display of dysfunction. I learned to live with their stares. The photo was a declaration. It was a statement that we were done with secrets, done with polite fictions. It was the ugliest, most honest family portrait I had ever seen, and I loved it. I walk past it every day. I see my own face, calm and defiant amidst the chaos. I see Rowan's, caught in the exact moment his world broke open. I see Naomi, her mask of control slipping to reveal the panic beneath. It's a snapshot of an ending, but it's also the picture of our beginning. The beginning of a life where we no longer had to perform for the camera, where we didn't have to blend in or shrink ourselves to fit into a frame someone else built. We were building our own now, with its own rules. The other day, Rowan came up behind me as I was looking at it. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. We stood there for a moment, just looking at the image of our family's detonation. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. I thought for a moment, tracing the outline of the bold black arrow with my eyes. "I regret that it hurt you," I said honestly, "but I don't regret telling the truth." He squeezed me gently. "Me neither." We stood in silence, the past captured and contained behind a pane of glass. It no longer had the power to haunt us. It was just a story now. Our story. I looked at my grey t-shirt in the photo, the one that started it all, and a small smile touched my lips. Neutral was never my colour anyway.
For 10 years, my salary wasn't my own. It was a family resource, a communal fund I was expected to replenish every 2 weeks. My name is Vivian Fletcher, and I'm 32 years old. For a decade since I landed my first corporate job at 22, I paid for the mortgage on my parents' house, their car insurance, their utilities, and my brother's endless stream of failed business ventures. I paid for it all at the cost of my own life, my own savings, my own dreams. I told myself it was a daughter's duty, a sister's responsibility. But duty and responsibility don't feel like a stone in your gut every time you approve a bank transfer. It all came to a head 3 months ago at a mid-range Italian restaurant with sticky tablecloths and wine that was a little too sweet. It was the place my mother always chose for special occasions, mostly because she knew I'd be picking up the tab. But this time, the occasion was mine. Jamie, my fiancé, sat beside me, his hand warm and steady on my knee under the table. He was a good man, a kind man, who saw the exhaustion behind my carefully constructed composure. He was the first person who ever asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I owed. After the waiter cleared our appetizer plates, I took a deep breath. "I have some news," I announced, my voice a little too bright. My mother, Allison, who was 60, offered a tight, practiced smile. My father, Philip, 63, grunted from behind his menu, already annoyed by the interruption to his meal planning. My younger brother Uriah, who was 28 and perpetually between projects, just scrolled on his phone, barely listening. I held up my left hand. A simple, elegant diamond on a platinum band caught the dim restaurant light. Jamie asked me to marry him. We're engaged. Jamie squeezed my knee, his smile genuine and hopeful. He was trying so hard for me. For a moment, there was just silence. Not the happy, stunned kind. It was heavy, judgmental. Uriah finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before a lazy, charming grin spread across his face. Wow, sis. Congrats. It sounded hollow. My mother's eyes weren't on the ring. They were on my face, sharp and calculating. She set her fork down with a delicate click. Oh, Vivian. It's lovely. She paused, letting the word hang in the air, stripped of all warmth. But what does this mean for the house bills? You know your father's pension doesn't cover everything. The question landed like a punch. Not, congratulations. Not, I'm so happy for you. Just a cold, immediate accounting of my financial obligations to her. Before I could even process the sting, my father slammed his menu onto the table. The sound made the other diners flinch. What is this? He boomed, his face turning a blotchy red. You make a decision like this without a family discussion? Philip, calm down, my mother murmured, placing a hand on his arm, the perfect portrait of a concerned wife. No, he snapped, shaking her off. Her income supports this family. That was the arrangement. You get married, he starts getting ideas, and suddenly the money you earn is your money. It's a betrayal, is what it is. A betrayal. Getting engaged at 32 was a betrayal. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's mask of worried disappointment. Then I looked at Uriah. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my father, a small, smug smirk playing on his lips. He was already calculating, figuring out which new guilt trip angle would work best to keep his allowance flowing. He was on their side. He was always on their side. My heart, which had been fluttering with nervous joy just moments before, felt like it was turning to ice in my chest. I saw it all with a sudden, brutal clarity. The years of manipulation, the entitlement, the bottomless, thankless pit I'd been pouring my life into. They didn't see a daughter. They saw an asset. I didn't say a word. I simply pulled my hand back from the center of the table. I stood up, my chair scraping quietly against the floor. Jamie stood with me, his expression hardening as he looked at my family. Vivienne, sit down, my father commanded. We are not done here. I looked at him, at all of them, one last time. I let the silence stretch, letting them see the blankness in my eyes. There was nothing left to say. There had been nothing left to say for years. I just hadn't realized it until now. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them with the bill. They thought silence meant surrender. They didn't know I had a ledger darker than their souls. The silence in the car on the way home from the restaurant was heavier than any argument. Jamie drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. He didn't press me, didn't ask questions. He just waited. It wasn't until we were back in our apartment, the door locked behind us, that he finally turned to me. Viv, he said, his voice soft. What are we going to do? I didn't cry. I had spent the last 10 years learning how to swallow my tears until they turned into something hard and useful. I'm going to do what I've been preparing to do for a decade, I said, my voice steady. I just need you to trust me. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and nodded. Always. That's when I showed him the ledgers. Not just one, but a series of them, stored in a fireproof safe in my home office. 10 years of my life, documented in neat, obsessive columns. Every transfer for the mortgage, every check for the car payment, every wire for Uriah's latest can't-miss opportunity. Beside each entry was a date, a transaction ID, and a note. "I don't understand," Jamie said, flipping through a binder from 8 years ago. "You kept records. So what? They'll just say they were gifts." "They weren't gifts," I replied, pulling out a thick, leather-bound document from the bottom of the safe. "They were loans." I laid the document on the coffee table. It was titled Fletcher Family Estate and Financial Support Agreement. My parents' signatures, bold and confident, were on the final page, right next to mine. They'd signed it 10 years ago when I was 22. I remember that day perfectly. I was in the office of Vanessa Parker, a partner at the first firm I worked for. She'd become a mentor to me, the only adult I felt I could be honest with. I'd broken down, confessing the immense financial pressure my family was putting on me. I was drowning. Vanessa, a sharp woman of 45 with eyes that missed nothing, didn't offer platitudes. She offered a strategy. "They feel entitled to your money," she'd said, her voice calm and clipped. "So we formalize it. We create a structure that protects you in the long run. We call it an estate plan. We frame it as a way to manage your contributions to the family assets. We make it look like you're securing their future. In reality, you'll be documenting their debt." She drafted the agreement. It was a masterpiece of legal maneuvering, filled with clauses about asset management and familial support, all couched in the language of responsible estate planning. Buried in the technicalities was the core of the arrangement. Any and all funds transferred from me to them for non-personal use would be classified as a callable loan, subject to repayment upon a significant change in my life circumstances. A change like, for instance, getting married. My parents, blinded by their own greed and the prospect of formalizing their access to my paycheck, signed it without a second thought. They saw it as a guarantee, not a liability. Jamie stared at the signatures, his expression shifting from confusion to stunned admiration. "Vivian, this is genius." "It was survival," I corrected him. "Now, it's leverage." For the next week, Jamie threw himself into the project. My records were a mix of paper bank statements, digital transfers, and handwritten notes. As a software developer, he saw it as a data problem. He wrote a script to digitize everything, linking my notes to official bank records, creating a searchable, time-stamped database of my family's decade-long exploitation. "This is incredible," he said one night, pointing at his laptop screen. We were sitting on the floor of the office, surrounded by paper. "The patterns are so clear. Every time you got a raise, Uriah had a business emergency within a month. Every single time." I nodded. I'd lived it, but seeing it laid out in a graph was chilling. Then Jamie's expression changed. He leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" I asked. "Your brother's companies," he said slowly. "They're not just failures. There are transfers here. Money moving between 3 different LLCs he set up. It looks like he was shuffling your investments around to cover losses from previous failures. It's a classic shell game." My stomach twisted. I'd always known Uriah was incompetent, but I hadn't wanted to believe he was actively fraudulent. "Wait a second," Jamie muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He isolated a single transaction from 2 years ago. A transfer of $5,000 from one of Uriah's defunct tech startups, Innovate Solutions LLC. The memo line was simple: R&D investment. "What's weird about that?" I asked, my voice tight. He turned the laptop toward me. "It's not who the money came from, it's who it went to." I looked at the screen, at the recipient name on the bank transfer record, and my blood ran cold. It was a name I hadn't seen in years, a name that belonged to a ghost from my past. Ella Lowe, my estranged best friend. The name felt like a shard of glass in my memory. Ella Lowe. We had been inseparable in high school, the kind of friends who shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams of escaping our small town. But our friendship had withered over the last few years. She'd grown distant, offering vague excuses whenever I tried to make plans, until I finally stopped trying. Now I knew why. She hadn't drifted away. She'd switched sides. I sent her a text the next morning. "We need to talk. The Daily Grind Cafe. 1 hour." She replied almost instantly. "Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner, nervously shredding a napkin. At 31, Ella still had the same wide, anxious eyes she'd had at 17. She looked up as I approached, forcing a smile that didn't reach them. "Viv, you had me worried," she began. I didn't sit down. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the picture Jamie had taken of the bank statement, and placed it on the table in front of her. 2 years ago, my brother's company, Innovate Solutions LLC, sent you $5,000. The memo says R&D investment. I want you to tell me what exactly you were researching and developing for him. The color drained from her face. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing silently. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Ella," I said, my voice low and cold. "My money, funneled through my brother's fake company, ended up in your bank account. I want to know why." Her composure finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't like that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Your mom, she was so worried about you. She said you were pulling away, that you were working too much. She just wanted to know you were okay. And how did $5,000 help her know I was okay?" It was for my help," she stammered. "She'd call me, asking about you. If I'd heard from you, what was going on at your job, if you were dating anyone. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then she started asking for more details about your finances, your promotions." "And you told her," I stated. It wasn't a question. She nodded, shamefaced. "She said she was trying to prevent a total family breakdown, that you were vulnerable and she needed to protect you. The money. Uriah said it was a thank you from the family for being a good friend to you, for keeping an eye on you. A good friend." The words were so twisted, so warped by my mother's poison, that they were meaningless. She hadn't been my friend. She'd been their spy. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. The night we graduated high school. We were parked in my beat-up sedan at a scenic overlook, sharing a cheap pizza and a bottle of lukewarm soda. We'd talked for hours about our futures, about the women we were going to become. "We're a team, Viv," she'd said, bumping her shoulder against mine. "Always." That was the last time I'd felt truly close to her, before the distance began, before my mother's influence seeped in like a slow-acting venom and corroded everything. I looked at the woman in front of me, a stranger who wore my best friend's face. "She didn't want to protect me," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "She wanted to control me, and you helped her. You took money, my money, to betray me." "Vivian, please," she begged, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry. I never should have." I pulled my hand back. "Yes, you are sorry. You're sorry you got caught." I picked up my phone from the table. "We're done, Ella. Don't contact me again." I walked out of the cafe without looking back. The confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth, not of victory, but of profound loss. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with blocked calls from my father. He'd been trying non-stop since the dinner. On a grim impulse, I went into my voicemail intending to clear out the notifications, And that's when I saw it. A message from 2 months ago, from his number. An accidental dial he must have made. Curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. I heard his voice, muffled, as if the phone was in his pocket. He was talking to my mother. "Don't like this Jamie character," he was saying. "He's too independent. He'll give her ideas. If he gets in the way of her obligations, I'll make sure he regrets it. I'll find something. A man like that always has something to hide." The muffled sound of my father's voice, threatening the man I loved, was the last push I needed. The last thread of sentimentality I might have harbored for the man who raised me burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and sharp. It was no longer just about the money. It was about a threat. He had crossed a line, and he was about to find out how far I was willing to go to defend it. The next day, I was in Vanessa Parker's office. The same office where, 10 years ago, a terrified 22-year-old had signed a document that felt like a life raft. Now, I was here to pull the plug. "He threatened Jamie," I said, playing the voicemail for her. Vanessa listened, her expression unreadable. When it was over, she simply nodded. "Okay, that settles it. We move now." She swiveled in her leather chair and pulled a file from her cabinet. My file. It was thick with a decade's worth of my pain. "The agreement is clear. Your engagement constitutes a significant change in life circumstances. We can call the loan due in full, effective immediately." We spent the next 2 hours drafting the letter. It wasn't a messy, emotional plea. It was a surgical instrument. Clean, precise, and utterly ruthless. It was titled, "Contingent Enforcement Notice of Familial Loan Agreement." The language was deliberately sterile. Pursuant to the Fletcher Family Estate and Financial Support Agreement, signed and executed on August 14th, 10 years prior, this letter serves as formal notification that the contingent clause outlined in Section 4, subsection B, has been triggered. All outstanding funds, itemized in the attached exhibits, are now due in full within 90 days of receipt of this notice. The exhibits were the true weapon. Jamie and I had worked all weekend to compile them. 120 months of bank statements, wire transfers, and cancelled checks, all cross-referenced with my ledgers. Exhibit A was the primary mortgage and utility payments. Exhibit B covered car loans and insurance. Exhibit C was a detailed breakdown of every dollar I'd ever given Uriah. We attached the incorporation papers for his shell companies and highlighted the fraudulent money trail Jamie had uncovered. It was a mountain of undeniable, documented proof. "This will be delivered via certified mail," Vanessa said, sealing the thick envelope. "They'll have to sign for it. There will be no plausible deniability." I walked out of her office feeling strangely calm. The storm was coming, but for the first time, I was the one holding the lightning. 3 days later, my phone started to ring. My father, my mother, Uriah. I ignored them all. I could picture the scene in their living room with perfect clarity. My father, his face purple with rage, waving the letter in the air, shouting about disrespect and betrayal. My mother, collapsing onto the sofa, weeping about how she could have raised such a cruel, ungrateful daughter. And Uriah, pale and sweating, staring at Exhibit C, the document that didn't just ask for his allowance back, but exposed his entire pathetic con. He wouldn't be panicking about the family home. He'd be panicking about the very real possibility of jail time. The calls and texts became more frantic, a digital barrage of guilt, threats, and feigned confusion. I blocked their numbers, let them scream into the void. The real call came late that night, just as Jamie and I were getting ready for bed. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Vivienne? It's Edison Sullivan." My blood ran a little colder. Edison Sullivan had been our family's accountant for 15 years. He was a quiet, meticulous man who handled my parents' taxes and had once advised Uriah on setting up his first, and subsequently failed, business. He was a neutral party, completely unaware of my secret agreement. "Edison," I said, my voice even. "It's late. Is everything all right?" I don't know," he stammered. He sounded deeply uncomfortable. "I just got off the phone with your parents. Vivian, they're hysterical. They received some sort of legal notice from your lawyer." "I'm aware," I said. There was a long pause. "They seem to be under the impression that this is some kind of mistake or a threat. They want to hire me to help them prepare a lawsuit against you." I felt Jamie tense beside me. "A lawsuit for what?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Edison cleared his throat. "For financial deception." "Financial deception?" I repeated the words, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "They signed a contract, Edison, a legally binding one." "That's what I tried to explain to them," he said, his voice strained. "But your father insists you tricked them, that you misrepresented the document as a simple estate formality. They're claiming you acted in bad faith." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They were going to play the victims. Of course they were. It was the only role my mother knew how to play, and my father's arrogance wouldn't let him admit he'd been outmaneuvered. "Thank you for letting me know, Edison," I said calmly. "My lawyer will handle any official correspondence." I hung up before he could say more. Jamie looked at me, his face a mask of fury. "They're going to sue you after everything you've done for them?" "They're going to try," I said. "But they're not thinking clearly. They're cornered, so they're lashing out. And they just gave me an opening. I had no intention of getting dragged into a messy, protracted lawsuit. Suing them back felt like getting into a mud wrestling match with pigs. You get dirty, and the pigs enjoy it. My plan was always cleaner, more precise. It was about consequences, not conflict. The next morning, I didn't call Vanessa to draft a countersuit. Instead, I had her package Exhibit C, the full damning report on Uriah's shell companies and fraudulent transfers, and send it anonymously to the private equity group that had given him a small business loan 6 months prior. Uriah, in his infinite arrogance, had bragged about securing the funding for his latest venture, a boutique marketing firm. He'd told my parents it was proof of his genius. I knew it was just more debt, built on a foundation of lies. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The investment group, upon seeing evidence that their seed money was likely being used to cover old debts from other failed ventures, launched an internal fraud investigation. Within a week, Uriah's accounts were frozen. That's when the second bomb dropped. A letter arrived from a credit agency alerting me to a collections inquiry on a defaulted business loan. My stomach plummeted. I called the agency, my heart pounding. The loan was for Uriah's marketing firm, and my name was on it. He had forged my signature as a co-signer. Another betrayal, deeper and more insidious than I could have imagined. He hadn't just stolen my money, he'd stolen my name, my credit, my reputation. Jamie and Vanessa worked tirelessly for 2 days, gathering evidence, filing affidavits, and contacting the credit bureaus to report the identity theft. It was a bureaucratic nightmare, but the proof was on our side. My signature on the loan documents was a clumsy, obvious forgery compared to the crisp, legitimate one on the family loan agreement. While we fought the legal and financial fires, my parents opened a new front, the court of public opinion. They started with old family friends, then moved to social media. My mother's Facebook page, once a sedate collection of garden photos, became a stage for her martyrdom. She wrote vague, passive-aggressive posts about the pain of being abandoned by a child, about how some people forget where they came from. My father was more direct, telling anyone who would listen that his own daughter was trying to steal his home out of pure spite because she'd fallen for a man who had turned her against her own family. They painted me as a cold, vindictive monster, and some people believed them. I got texts from distant cousins and old high school acquaintances telling me I should be ashamed of myself. The emotional fatigue was immense. It was one thing to fight a legal battle. It was another to have your character assassinated by the people who were supposed to love you most. "Don't let them get to you," Jamie said, wrapping his arms around me as I stared blankly at another hateful comment on my mother's page. "It's just noise. They're desperate." He was right, but I was tired. I was so tired. "We need something to cut through the noise," I said, my mind racing, something they can't deny or twist. And then I remembered, for years, I had made a habit of recording our phone calls. Not all of them, but the important ones, the ones where money was discussed. It started as a way to keep track of their endless conflicting requests. Now it was my ace in the hole. I spent an entire night sifting through audio files, my stomach churning as I listened to a decade of my own carefully managed voice, always calm, always accommodating, while their voices whined, demanded, and cajoled. And then I found it. A call from 4 years ago. My father was complaining about a leak in the roof. "The contractor wants $5,000. His recorded voice grumbled. "Just add it to the loan for the family housing maintenance. We'll sort it out later, like always." "The loan," I had repeated back to him, my voice clear as a bell. "Okay, I'll transfer it now." He'd said it, the magic word. Loan, not gift, not help. Loan. It was the one piece of evidence that could shatter their entire narrative of deception. He had acknowledged the terms, clear as day. I saved the file, a small, triumphant smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. They wanted to fight in the court of reputation? Fine. I was ready to present my evidence. I sent the audio file to Vanessa with a simple message. "Hold this. We'll use it if they formally file their suit." The recording was my insurance policy, the final nail for a coffin they were building for themselves. For now, I was content to let them exhaust themselves with their social media campaign. The truth had a longer shelf life than their lies. But then, life threw a wrench into my meticulously laid plans. A call came from a hospital social worker. My father had a stroke. It was minor, she explained, a transient ischemic attack. He was stable, conscious, and expected to recover. But in the chaos of his admission, the hospital staff had reviewed his paperwork. My name was listed as his primary medical directive, the person legally designated to make decisions if he became incapacitated. The document was 15 years old, signed when I was 17, a relic from a time when I was still just their dutiful daughter, before the money, before the agreement, before the war. "He's asking to see you," the social worker said gently. I felt nothing. No surge of panic, no flicker of old affection, just a weary sense of obligation. I was legally bound to go. The hospital room was cold and smelled of antiseptic. My father was propped up in bed, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen him. The familiar blustering energy was gone, replaced by a grey, fragile weariness. An IV was taped to the back of his hand. My mother sat in a chair by the window, her face puffy from crying. She shot me a look of pure venom as I walked in. "Look what you've done," she hissed, her voice a low, trembling whisper. "All this stress. The doctor said stress was a major factor. This is your fault." I ignored her and walked to the side of my father's bed, his eyes, watery and clouded, fixed on me. "Vivienne," he rasped, his voice weak. "You came." "The hospital called me," I said, my tone flat. "My name is on your directive." He seemed to flinch at my coldness. He gestured weakly with his free hand. "Your mother? She's upset. We're all upset. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. I waited, saying nothing. The letter, he continued, his breathing shallow. It was a shock. We never thought of it like that. It was just family helping family. It was a loan, Dad. You called it a loan yourself, I said, my voice unwavering. His eyes widened slightly. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The phone call about the roof. He knew I had him. Listen, he said, trying to push himself up on his elbows and failing. We can't pay that. Not now. Not all at once. Just delay it. Postpone the repayment. Give us some time to figure things out. For my health. He was begging. My father, the proud, overbearing patriarch who believed my life belonged to him, was begging. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, pity, maybe, or the ghost of a daughter's love, stirred in my chest. I saw a weak, scared old man in a hospital bed. I saw my mother, her face a mask of grief and fury, and I felt the immense, crushing weight of our shared history. Maybe I could just pause it, give them a reprieve. And then I saw it, the glint in his eye. It wasn't fear, it was cunning. He wasn't broken, he was strategizing. He was using his own health, his own mortality as another tool of manipulation. He thought my guilt would be stronger than my resolve. He thought I would blink. In that instant, I knew. If I gave them an inch, they would take my whole life all over again. The cycle would never end. The terms of the agreement are clear, I said, my voice as sterile as the room around me. You have 67 days left to remit payment in full. I suggest you have your accountant look into refinancing options. My mother gasped. My father stared at me, his mouth agape, the cunning in his eyes turning to pure, unfiltered rage. I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of my mother's renewed sobs following me down the hall. The drive home was a blur. I felt hollowed out, emotionally scoured. When I walked through the door, Jamie was waiting for me, a grim look on his face. Vanessa just called, he said. She was doing a deeper dive into your parents' assets, preparing for the foreclosure process if they default. And? I asked, bracing myself. And she found something. Your dad co-owned a small rental property with his brother, your uncle. They sold it 6 months ago. I frowned. Okay. So, Jamie said, his voice tight with anger. According to the loan agreement your parents signed, they were required to notify you of any significant liquidation of family assets. They were supposed to apply a portion of the proceeds to their outstanding debt to you. They didn't. They hid the sale. It's a direct breach of contract, an act of omission. They had money, not enough to pay me back in full, but a significant amount. And they had hidden it, all while smearing my name and plotting to sue me for deception. That was it. No more pity, no more hesitation. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. The discovery of the hidden asset sale was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about their entitlement anymore. It was about deliberate, calculated deceit. They had money they could have used to pay me back, even partially, but they chose to hide it. They chose to lie. The breach of contract gives us grounds to accelerate the process, Vanessa explained over the phone the next morning. We don't have to wait the full 90 days. We can file for a lien against their primary residence immediately. Do it, I said, my voice cold. There was no hesitation. The legal machinery, once set in motion, moved with brutal efficiency. The lien was placed, and when they inevitably failed to respond or produce the funds, foreclosure proceedings began on the family house. The house I grew up in, the house whose mortgage I had paid for the last 10 years. There was a cruel, poetic justice to it that I hadn't anticipated. Years ago, as part of the estate planning facade, my parents had added my name to the title of the house as a joint tenant. It was a symbolic gesture, meant to assure me that my investment was secure. They assumed I would never act on it, that the piece of paper was just another way to keep me tethered to them. They never imagined their own tool of manipulation would become my instrument of reclamation. The news of Uriah's business collapsing hit the local paper first. It was a small article in the business section about a boutique marketing firm under investigation for investor fraud. My name, thankfully, was kept out of it, as Vanessa and Jamie's quick action had already established me as a victim of his identity theft. But the public humiliation for my brother was absolute. His reputation as a charming, if hapless, entrepreneur was shattered. He was just a common thief. Then came the foreclosure notice, a public record that couldn't be hidden. The story of my family's financial ruin began to circulate, twisting and turning through the town's gossip mill. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ella. "Viv, I heard what's happening. I am so sorry for everything. Is there anything I can do?" I stared at the message for a long time. The betrayal still stung, but now it was overlaid with a sense of grim finality. She was a casualty of a war she had helped start. I typed out a single reply. "Your karma came dressed in paperwork." I blocked her number. A few days later, my mother showed up at my office. She bypassed security by telling them she was my mother, a fact that still held some power in the world, and appeared at my desk unannounced. She looked haggard, her expensive clothes hanging loosely on her thinning frame. The mask of the grieving matriarch had been replaced by raw, desperate panic. "You have to stop this, Vivian," she pleaded, her voice a harsh whisper. People in the office were starting to look. "You're destroying us. Your father is still recovering. We're going to lose our home." "You mean my home," I corrected her, my voice quiet but firm. "The one I've been paying for since I was 22. You had options. You had money from the rental property you sold. You chose to hide it." Her face went pale. She hadn't known I knew. That was for our retirement, for emergencies. "I was your daughter, not your emergency fund," I said, standing up. I gathered my purse and my laptop. "You need to leave." "We did everything for you," she cried, her voice rising in pitch. "We gave you a good life." "You gave me a debt," I said, walking past her toward the exit. "And I'm done paying it." She followed me into the hallway, her desperation escalating into a full-blown spectacle. "We're your parents, Vivian, your family. You can't do this to us." I stopped at the elevator and turned to face her one last time. The years of pain, of sacrifice, of feeling small and unseen, coalesced into a single quiet moment of clarity. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard truth. I looked her directly in the eye. "You were my creditors," I whispered, the words hanging in the air between us. "And the debt is now expired." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, and as they slid shut, I saw her face crumble, the final dawning horror of a woman who had just realized she had lost everything, not because of a cruel daughter, but because of her own choices. A few weeks after my mother's visit, Jamie and I got married. We didn't want a big wedding with all the performance and expectation that came with it. We wanted something that was just for us. We went to City Hall on a crisp autumn afternoon. I wore a simple cream-colored dress, and Jamie wore his best suit. Our only witnesses were Vanessa and one of Jamie's friends from work. Standing before the justice of the peace in a quiet, sunlit room, I held Jamie's hands. They were warm and steady, a safe harbor. When he slid the simple gold band onto my finger, it felt less like a new beginning and more like an arrival. I was finally home. There were no calculations, no obligations, no hidden clauses. There was just this man, his unwavering loyalty, and the simple, clean promise of a shared future. Afterward, we went for lunch at a small bistro, the kind of place my mother would have called unimpressive. It was perfect. We drank champagne and talked about our honeymoon, a trip to Italy we were planning for the spring, paid for with money that was unequivocally ours. That evening, back in our apartment, I sat at my desk while Jamie made us tea. The legal battles were essentially over. The foreclosure on the house was proceeding, an impersonal process that no longer required my emotional input. Uriah was entangled in his own legal nightmare, facing charges of wire fraud and identity theft. I had been cleared of any involvement, a clear victim in the eyes of the law. My parents had moved into a small rental apartment, their public campaign of sympathy having fizzled out when the facts of their hidden assets and my brother's crimes came to light. People had asked me if I felt good about it, if revenge tasted sweet. It didn't. It wasn't sweet or bitter. It tasted like balance, like closing a book that had been open for too long. It was the quiet, profound satisfaction of correcting a decade-long accounting error. My actions weren't born from a desire to inflict pain, but from a desperate need to enforce a boundary that had been violated my entire adult life. It wasn't an act of bitterness, it was an act of closure. I pulled out a piece of heavy cream-colored stationery and a matching gold-lined envelope. On the paper, I printed a single document. It wasn't a letter. It was an invoice. At the top, it read, "Invoice for services rendered and funds advanced, August 2013, August 2023. Below, I didn't itemize. The time for itemization was over. The exhibits had done that work. This was just the final sum, the bottom line they had never been forced to look at. I typed the number, the culmination of 10 years of meticulous, painful record keeping. Total amount due, 386,220.37. I folded the paper neatly and slid it into the gold envelope. I didn't write a return address. It didn't need one. This was a one-way communication. Jamie came into the office and set a mug of tea on my desk. He looked at the envelope in my hand. He didn't have to ask what it was. He just placed his hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of support. I'm not angry anymore. The anger was a fuel that got me here, but I don't need it to move forward. I'm just done. Done carrying the weight of their expectations, their manipulations, their endless grasping needs. I'm done carrying debt, both emotional and financial. The next morning, on my way to work, I stopped at a mailbox. The gold envelope felt weightless in my hand. I slid it through the slot, and the soft thud as it landed inside was the quietest, most definitive sound I had ever heard. And for once, all the bills are paid, including the one they never thought I'd send.
The video call window was a perfect grid of my family's expectations. My name is Holly. I'm 34, and for most of my life, I've been the empty square in their perfect family portrait. In the top left, my mother, Iris, 61, was already in planning mode, her face a mask of tense hospitality. Beside her, my father, Bruno, 64, was a silent, stoic presence, his expression unreadable as always. Below them was the main event. My brother Dylan, 36, with his wife Jennifer, 35, flanking him like bookends. Their 2 children, my niece Peyton, 9, and nephew Carter, 6, occasionally popped into the frame to wave before being shooed away. They were the holy trinity of suburban success. The corporate guy husband, the Instagram perfect wife, and the 2.5 kids, or in their case, a neat 2. Okay, so for the 40th anniversary dinner, my mother was saying, tapping a pen on her notepad, I found a place that requires jackets for the men. Dylan, you'll pack a blazer, right? Of course, Mom, Dylan said, with the easy confidence of a man who has never been asked to sleep on a couch. I smiled, a genuine, secret smile they couldn't decipher. They thought we were planning a trip. They were debating flights, rental cars, and dinner reservations for a trip to a tropical paradise. What they didn't know was that I'd already taken care of the most important part. 2 months ago, I'd drained a significant portion of my savings to book a breathtaking 4-bedroom beachfront villa. It had an infinity pool, a private chef for 2 nights, and a master suite for them with a balcony overlooking the ocean. Each couple would have their own room, their own bathroom, their own space. It was my grand gesture, the one that would finally make them see me. Not as the unmarried, childless, career-focused daughter, but as Holly, the one who did this for them. And the sleeping arrangements are simple enough, Mum continued, her eyes scanning her list. Bruno and I will take a master bedroom, of course. Dylan and Jen will take the other one. The kids can share the room with the 2 twin beds. She paused, and I felt my smile tighten. I knew what was coming next. It was the same casual dismissal I'd been hearing my whole life, just repackaged for a new location. "And Holly, sweetheart, don't worry," she said, her voice dripping with condescension she probably didn't even recognise. "The rental listing says there's a brand new pull-out couch in the main living area. You can sleep there." The words hung in the air, echoing in the silent space of my apartment. The pull-out couch, not a room. Not even a thought that I, a 34-year-old woman who was paying for this fantasy, deserved a door that closed. I was the leftover, the add-on, the person who could be tucked away in the public space after everyone else was comfortably settled in their private sanctuaries. Dylan, ever the helpful tormentor, chimed in with a smug grin. "Hey, if you really want a room, Holes, you know the rules." "Gotta bring a man to the party." Jennifer let out a delicate, tittering laugh, covering her mouth with perfectly manicured fingers. My father just stared, his expression unchanging, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. It turned from hurt into a cold, clear, silent fury. This wasn't new. It was the 1000th cut, but this time the knife hit bone. They saw me as a temporary guest in my own family, my value directly tied to a husband and children I'd chosen not to have. I kept the smile plastered on my face. It felt brittle, like a piece of glass about to shatter. "You're right," I said, my voice eerily calm. "That makes total sense. Well, I have to run to another meeting, but this all sounds great. Can't wait." "Okay, honey, we'll see you at the airport," Mum chirped, already turning back to her notes. I ended the call. The grid of their faces vanished, leaving only my own reflection on the dark screen. For a long moment, I just sat there, the echo of their casual cruelty ringing in my ears. The secret excitement I'd been holding for weeks curdled into something bitter and metallic. Then I opened my laptop. I navigated to the villa rental website, my fingers moving with a steady, determined purpose. I found my reservation. The beautiful pictures of the infinity pool and the ocean view bedrooms mocked me. I clicked on Manage Booking. Then I clicked the big red button that read Cancel Reservation. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure? This action cannot be undone." I stared at it, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face for real this time. It was a smile that held 34 years of being second best, of being overlooked, of being the punchline. I clicked Confirm. An email instantly appeared in my inbox. "Your cancellation is confirmed." I leaned back in my chair, the tension draining out of me, replaced by a humming, dangerous calm. Let's see where that couch gets you now. The first person I called was Serenity. My phone was still warm in my hand from the video call, and the silence in my apartment felt charged. "Okay, spill," she said, skipping the pleasantries. She knew my family call tone. "What did the matriarch decree this time?" "I've been sentenced to the couch," I said flatly. "For what crime?" "Existing while single. You know it." "Mom just casually assigned me the living room pull-out for their anniversary trip. Dylan thought it was hilarious. He said I should have brought a husband if I wanted a bedroom." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then Serenity let out a low whistle. Wow. That's a new level of awful, even for them. "What did you do?" "I cancelled the villa." The silence this time was longer, more profound. "Wait," she said slowly. "The luxury, 4-bedroom, private pool villa that you booked and paid for as their surprise 40th anniversary gift? The very one! Holly, she breathed, and I could practically hear her grin through the phone. You magnificent bastard. Please tell me you're not going to warn them. A wicked little thrill shot through me. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Good, she said, her voice firm. Let it burn. Let them land in paradise and find out they have nowhere to stay because they couldn't be bothered to treat their daughter like a human being. This isn't petty, Holly. This is a long overdue correction. Hanging up, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Serenity was right. This wasn't just a reaction, it was a decision. I was going to fully commit. I spent the next hour fortifying my digital defences. The cancellation had generated a flurry of emails from the rental company, confirmations, refund processing notices, a sad little survey asking why I'd cancelled. I created a specific email rule. Any message from the rental company's domain was to be marked as read and immediately archived. Out of sight. Out of mind. The booking was in my name, on my card, through my email. They would never know. For the next 2 weeks, the family group chat buzzed with oblivious excitement. Jennifer posted links to overpriced resort wear. Dylan sent screenshots of the flight details. My mother sent a detailed itinerary that included relaxing at the rental property on 3 separate afternoons. I played along, responding with thumbs up emojis and non-committal phrases like sounds great and can't wait. Each message was a small, satisfying twist of the knife. It was easy to play the part because I'd been doing it my whole life. I remembered being 12, bursting through the door with a certificate for winning the regional science fair. I'd spent months on that project. My mum was on the phone, and she just waved me away, mouthing, "Just a minute." A few hours later, Dylan came home, his soccer uniform stained with grass. He hadn't won his game. His team had lost 3-1, but he'd scored their only goal. My father clapped him on the back. My mother immediately started talking about getting his jersey framed. My science fair certificate ended up in a drawer, forgotten. It was never one big thing. It was a lifetime of small dismissals, of my accomplishments being measured against a different, lesser scale than Dylan's. His promotion was a cause for a steak dinner. My raise was a quiet, "Oh, that's nice, dear." His engagement to Jennifer was a citywide event. My decision to focus on my career was met with concerned whispers about my biological clock. But now, for the first time, I wasn't the one being overlooked. I was the one watching. I was in control. The feeling was intoxicating, a cold, steady hum beneath my skin. The day of their departure arrived. I sent a breezy, "Have a safe flight" text to the group chat, which was met with a flurry of airplane and palm tree emojis. Then I opened the airline app and typed in their flight number. I watched the little animated plane taxi to the runway. I watched it take off, a tiny icon soaring across a digital map. For 8 hours, I tracked their progress over the ocean, a silent, vengeful god watching from above. As the plane began its descent, I opened a new message to the family group chat. I took my time, selecting the perfect screenshot, the cancellation confirmation email, with the date, the property name, and the words "status cancelled" clearly visible. I typed out a short, simple caption. Then I put my phone down and waited. I watched the flight tracker until the status changed from in-flight to landed. I picked up my phone, my heart hammering with a strange mix of terror and glee. I attached the screenshot, added the caption, and pressed send. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, the deep red liquid a perfect match for the simmering satisfaction in my chest. My phone lay face up on the kitchen counter, silent. I had calculated the time it would take them to deplane, get through customs, and collect their luggage. The first buzz came exactly when I expected it to. It was a text from Dylan in the group chat. "Landed grabbing the bags now. Can you resend the address for the rental car driver?" A few seconds later, Jennifer added a string of emojis, a palm tree, a sun, a cocktail glass. Oblivious. Perfect. My mother followed up. "Holly, send the address." The children are getting restless. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. I let them wait for 5 full minutes, imagining the scene. The 6 of them standing awkwardly in the arrivals hall, humidity sticking to their skin, the kids starting to whine, my father looking off into the distance. The initial vacation buzz was likely already fading into impatience. My fingers hovered over the screen. I opened our chat, tapped the paperclip icon, and selected the screenshot from my photo library. The image of the cancellation confirmation loaded, stark and official. I typed the caption I'd composed in my head 100 times over the past 2 weeks. Enjoy the couch. I hit send. The reaction was instantaneous. 3 dots appeared and disappeared under Dylan's name so fast they were a blur. Dylan. Dylan. What is this? Dylan. Holly, call me. This isn't funny. Jennifer. I don't understand. Is there a problem with the booking? Mom. Holly Ann Weber, you'd better explain this right now. My phone started ringing. Dylan's smug face filling the screen. I watched the call for a moment, then calmly pressed the red decline button. He immediately tried again. I declined it again. The group chat exploded. Dylan, pick up your phone. Dylan, the driver has no record of a reservation under your name, or our name. Or any name. Mum, this is unacceptable. We are standing here with 2 tired children. What have you done? I took another sip of wine, a real smile touching my lips. I could picture my mother's face, pinched with fury. I could see Jennifer frantically scrolling on her phone, her perfect facade cracking under the stress. As if on cue, I saw her typing. Jennifer, I'm looking for a hotel. Everything seems to be very expensive. All full. Curiosity piqued. I opened a browser on my laptop and typed in the name of the city, followed by hotels. The first thing that popped up was a banner ad. Welcome to the annual Sunstone Music and Arts Festival. Find last-minute tickets here. A little detail I'd discovered during my research 2 weeks ago. A massive, island-wide festival was kicking off this very weekend. It's why I'd had to book the villa so far in advance. I clicked on a major booking site. Every decent hotel was a sea of red text. Sold out. The few available options were either seedy-looking motels an hour from the coast, or astronomically priced luxury suites demanding a 5-night minimum. I could just imagine Jennifer's horror as she realised her options were a Roach motel or a $5,000 bill. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't a call this time, but a notification. Voicemail from Mum. My thumb trembled slightly as I tapped the notification. I held the phone to my ear, the wine glass cold in my other hand. There was no greeting, just the sound of airport chaos in the background, a baby crying, and then my mother's voice, low and shaking with a rage so profound it was almost quiet. You are no longer welcome in this family. The line went dead. The voicemail felt less like a message and more like a branding. You are no longer welcome in this family. The words echoed in the silence of my apartment long after I'd deleted the recording. I finished my wine, but the warmth it had given me was gone, replaced by a hollow chill. The next morning, the fallout began to ripple outward. My phone lit up with a message from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Holly, your mother called me. I'm so worried about you. Are you having some kind of breakdown? To do something so cruel? Another one followed from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Heard what happened? Seriously messed up. They had kids with them. The narrative had been set, and I was the villain. My mother, a master of spinning stories to fit her worldview, had painted me as a vindictive, mentally unstable spinster who had sabotaged their long-awaited family vacation for no reason. The part about me secretly booking and paying for the entire thing as a gift was, of course, conveniently omitted. I was being blamed for ruining a trip they didn't even know they were supposed to be on, courtesy of me. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. This was their classic move: reframe, deflect, and designate a scapegoat. It reminded me of my failed engagement 6 years ago. Mark had been a perfectly nice guy, but we just weren't right for each other. The breakup was mutual and amicable. When I told my mother, her first words weren't, "Are you okay?" but "What did you do to drive him away?" She'd told the entire extended family that I'd been too focused on my career and not accommodating enough. She made it sound like I'd fumbled my one shot at a normal life. Her pity had hurt more than the breakup ever could. I was scrolling through the accusatory texts when a screenshot from Serenity popped up. It was from a private family group on Facebook that I'd been removed from years ago. My cousin had posted a vague status. Sending prayers to my aunt and uncle, who were dealing with a very difficult family situation on what should have been a happy anniversary trip. Some people are just selfish. The comments were a sickening cascade of sympathy for them and condemnation for the unnamed selfish person. Me. "Do not engage," Serenity texted. "Don't even think about it. Let them stew in their own lies." She was right, but the injustice burned. I drafted a post in my head, a long, detailed explanation, complete with screenshots of the villa booking, the receipt, and the condescending group chat messages. I wanted to expose them, to show everyone the truth, but I hesitated. It felt like stooping to their level, engaging in the same petty drama they thrived on. I closed the app, my thumb hovering over the discard button. I was staring at my phone, lost in a haze of anger and resentment, when a new text message appeared from an unknown number. My stomach clenched, bracing for another attack from a distant relative. But the message wasn't angry. It was just 3 words. "I am sorry." I stared at it, confused. I texted back, "Who is this?" The reply came a minute later. "It's your father." My breath caught in my throat. My father rarely texted. He was a man of few words, and even fewer digital communications. In the 34 years I'd been alive, I could count the number of meaningful conversations we'd had on one hand. His silence had always felt like a quiet endorsement of my mother's behaviour. For him to reach out now to apologise, it was unheard of. My fingers typed a response before I could think it through. Sorry for what? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a message came through. For all of it. For not speaking up. Can we get coffee when I'm back? I stared at the screen, the angry buzz from the rest of my family fading into the background. This was a crack in the foundation, a variable I had never anticipated. My revenge was supposed to be simple, a clean cut. But my father's text was a complication, a ghost in the sand I hadn't planned on. A week later, I was sitting across from my father in a quiet, neutral ground coffee shop halfway between my apartment and my childhood home. He looked tired. The failed vacation had clearly taken its toll. There were new lines around his eyes, and his usual stoicism seemed heavier, more brittle. He stirred his black coffee, the clinking of the spoon against ceramic, the only sound between us for a full minute. "They found a place, you know," he said finally, his voice raspy. "Some motel off the highway. Jennifer called it rustic. The kids called it gross." I didn't say anything, just sipped my latte. I wasn't here for a debrief on their miserable trip. He seemed to understand. He put the spoon down and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like years. "I'm not here to make excuses for your mother, Holly, or for myself." He took a deep breath. "I've known for a long time that the way she treats you isn't fair. The way she holds Dylan up like a trophy and just sees you as a problem to be solved." The bluntness of it surprised me. I had expected him to hedge, to soften the blow, but he didn't. "I always told myself she'd change," he continued, staring into his coffee cup. "When you were kids, I thought she was just old-fashioned, stuck in that mindset that the son carries the name and the daughter finds a husband. I thought she'd grow out of it as the world changed, but she didn't. She just dug in deeper. She weaponized tradition. Everything became about appearances, about what the neighbours and the family would think." He finally met my eyes again, and I saw a flicker of something I'd never seen there before. Regret. And I let her. I didn't want the fight. It was easier to stay quiet, to let it go, and every time I did, I let you down. I see that now. Standing in that airport, watching your mother scream into her phone while Dylan tried to blame everyone but himself. I saw what my silence had helped build, and I was ashamed. I still didn't know what to say. This was more than I'd ever heard him speak about our family in my entire life. "Before I met your mother," he said, his voice dropping lower, "I had a plan. I was going to move to the coast, California, maybe Oregon, get a small place by the water, learn to sail. Leave all this pressure behind." He gestured vaguely, as if encompassing the whole of his life. "But I met Iris, and she wanted the house in the suburbs, the 2 kids, the country club membership. And I loved her. So I gave up my dream for hers. I don't regret loving her, but I regret losing myself completely." He looked at me, a sad, knowing smile on his face. "You didn't do that. You built your own life, on your own terms. What you did, it was explosive. It was messy. But I'm proud of you for having the strength to do it, the strength I never had." The confession hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. He wasn't just apologising for being a silent bystander. He was admitting to a lifetime of quiet desperation. For a moment, I saw him not as my distant father, but as a man who had made a different choice, who had let his own happiness be folded up and put away like a pull-out couch. We finished our coffee in a more comfortable silence. As we stood to leave, he put a hand on my arm. "For what it's worth, Holly, I am truly sorry." I just nodded, unable to form the words to respond. That evening, I was trying to process the conversation when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another relative, but I saw the caller ID, Dylan. My finger hovered over the delete button, but my father's words echoed in my head. I pressed play. His voice was strained, unfamiliar. The usual smugness was gone, replaced by a raw, ragged edge. "Holly, call me back, please." He took a shaky breath. "We got home last night. Jen, she packed a bag for her and the kids. She's at her sister's. She said she needs space. She said she can't be in a family that's this broken." There was a long pause, filled with the sound of his unsteady breathing. "She's talking about separation, Holly. I don't know what to do." He sounded small, lost, scared. I deleted Dylan's voicemail without a second thought. His panic was a distant storm that I had no interest in weathering. His perfect life was cracking, and a dark, shameful part of me was glad. A few days later, the predictable happened. I was scrolling through my social media feed when a photo from Jennifer stopped my thumb mid-swipe. It was a picture of Peyton and Carter, smiling angelically on a beach, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The caption was a masterclass in passive aggression. "Making the best of a chaotic trip. So grateful for these moments and our little family's resilience. Only family over everything. Making memories." I saw right through it. The photo was carefully cropped to exclude the peeling paint of the highway motel. The smiles were forced, the lighting filtered to perfection. She was curating a narrative of blissful perseverance, erasing the ugly reality of their disastrous vacation. My blood boiled. The injustice of it, the sheer audacity of her lie, was infuriating. They had treated me like dirt, and now she was spinning the consequences of her own cruelty into a Hallmark card. I thought about Serenity's advice to stay silent, to not engage. But my father's confession had changed something in me. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about the lie itself. The lie that perfect families exist, and that anyone who doesn't fit the mould is the problem. That night, I did something I'd been debating for days. I opened Reddit, navigated to a private revenge-focused subreddit I sometimes lurked on, and created a throwaway account. With trembling fingers, I started to type. I told the whole story, leaving out names but including every damning detail. The secret booking of the villa, the casual cruelty of the video call, the couch sentence, Dylan's joke, the cancellation, and the final, satisfying text message. I laid it all bare, the years of being overlooked, the constant pressure to marry and have kids, the slow-burning, resentment that had finally ignited. I hit post and shut my laptop, my heart pounding. When I checked it the next morning, my jaw dropped. The post had hundreds of upvotes. The comments section was a flood of validation. NTA, not the arsehole. They played a stupid game and won a stupid prize. This is the most satisfying thing I've read all year. As the unmarried aunt, I felt this in my soul. I spent an hour reading through the replies, a strange sense of relief washing over me. These were strangers, but they saw me. They understood. Later that day, a private message appeared in my Reddit inbox. The username was LegalEagle86. "Hey," the message began. I don't normally do this, but I had to reach out. "Your story is incredible. I'm a lawyer, and for the last 5 years, I've been letting my in-laws walk all over me. My wife always asked me to just keep the peace. Reading your post, it was like a switch flipped. This morning, I finally told my father-in-law that we would not be spending our entire 2-week vacation at their house, and that his belittling comments about my career were no longer acceptable. It was terrifying and amazing, so thank you." We started messaging back and forth. His name was Sean. He was 38, and his story was eerily similar to mine, just from the other side of the fence. We talked about toxic family dynamics, the pressure to conform, and the liberating power of finally drawing a line in the sand. The conversation was easy, comfortable. For the first time, I was talking to someone who didn't just sympathise with my pain, he shared it. I told Serenity about the post and my conversation with Sean. "See," she said, her voice warm. "You thought this was just about revenge, but it's bigger than that. You're not just punishing them, Holly. You're empowering yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you're showing other people how to do it too." Her words stuck with me. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was a beginning. I was feeling a fragile sense of hope when the intercom buzzed, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Hello?" I said into the speaker. A familiar voice, tight with emotion, crackled through. "Holly?" "It's your mother. We need to talk." My first instinct was to say no, to leave her standing on the street, but a cold, steely resolve settled over me. I had been avoiding this, running from it. Now it was on my doorstep. I pressed the button to unlock the lobby door. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. When I opened my door, she was already standing there, looking smaller and more frayed than I'd ever seen her. Her carefully constructed facade of the unflappable matriarch was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate energy. She pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes darting around, taking in my space, my life, as if seeing it for the first time. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. She didn't wait for an answer. "Your brother's marriage is falling apart. Jennifer took the children. Your father is barely speaking to me. You blew up this family, Holly. For what? Because you had to sleep on a couch? Is your pride really that important?" I closed the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. I felt strangely calm, detached. The storm was finally here, and I was the eye of it. "It was never about the couch, Mom, and you know it. All I know," she snapped, her voice rising, "is that you have always been difficult, ungrateful. While Dylan built a life, a family, you did this." She gestured around my apartment, at my books, my art, my quiet, single life, as if it were a crime scene. "And now you've punished us for it. You will die alone, you know. Bitter and completely alone." The words were meant to be a curse, the ultimate weapon in her arsenal. For years, the threat of dying alone had been her go-to tactic, the fear she tried to instill in me to force me onto the path she'd chosen for herself. But hearing it now, it had no power. It was just a sad, pathetic threat from a woman who couldn't imagine a life different from her own. I looked her straight in the eye. I'd rather die free. The simple, quiet truth of my words seemed to suck the air out of the room. Her anger faltered, her face crumbling as the fury drained away, leaving something raw and ugly in its place. Her shoulders slumped. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother truly break. I was so proud of you when you got into law school, she whispered, her voice cracking. So proud. You were so smart, so independent. You could have done anything. She sank onto my sofa, the one I'd bought and paid for myself. You had a freedom I never did. I met your father at 20, I was married at 21, had Dylan at 25. My life was set. There were no other options. Tears began to stream down her face, cutting paths through her foundation. I look at you, and I see all the choices I never had, and I hate it. I hate that you didn't need a man to feel complete. I hate that you built this life all on your own. It made everything I sacrificed, everything I gave up, feel worthless. She looked up at me, her expression a painful mix of envy and resentment. I was jealous. I was so jealous of you, and I was too proud to ever admit it. The confession was stunning, a truth so deeply buried I never would have guessed it existed. A younger version of me would have rushed to her side, offered a hug, tried to soothe her pain, but I wasn't that person anymore. The chasm between us was too wide, carved out by too many years of casual cruelty. I didn't move from the door. My voice was quiet, devoid of anger or pity. It was just final. Thank you for telling me that, I said. This conversation is the last gift you'll ever get from me. She stared at me, understanding dawning in her tear-filled eyes. I was closing the door, not just to my apartment, but to us. I was done. She left without another word. The silence she left behind was heavy, but clean. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. I told her I'm moving out. I'm filing for a separation. It's time I found my own coast. My breath hitched. The dominoes were still falling. Just as I was processing his message, another one came through. It was from Dylan. She left me. Jen's gone for good. I think I see now what I never did, and I'm sorry. It's been 3 weeks since my mother stood in my apartment and laid the wreckage of her life at my feet. 3 weeks since I received the twin apologies from my father and brother, 2 men finally seeing the world clearly after their own had been shattered. Now, I'm standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean, a gentle breeze coming off the water. This is the villa. My villa. After a week of silence, I had called the rental company on a whim. The cancellation had been processed, but the property was miraculously available for the exact dates I had originally booked. It felt like a sign. So I booked it again, this time just for one. The house is enormous, silent, and beautiful. I walked through it when I arrived, a solitary ghost in a place meant for a family. I saw the master suite intended for my parents, its king-size bed and private terrace empty. I saw the second master, meant for Dylan and Jennifer, its pristine surfaces reflecting nothing. I saw the room with the 2 twin beds, where Peyton and Carter were supposed to sleep. They're just rooms. Wood, plaster, and glass. They hold no power, no ghosts of what might have been. They are simply empty spaces waiting to be filled, and for now, I am filling them with my own quiet presence. I take out my phone, the screen bright against the deepening twilight. I open my messages and find the family group chat. The last messages are still there. Dylan's desperate apology, my father's quiet declaration of independence. I haven't responded to either of them. There's nothing left to say. My thumb hovers over the screen, then I tap group details, scroll down, and press the red text, delete and leave conversation. A confirmation box pops up. I press it without hesitation. The thread vanishes. It's a small digital act, but it feels like an anchor being cut loose. A new message notification appears at the top of my screen. It's from Sean. Just checking in. Survived another week of family law. On a related note, my wife and I just booked our own vacation for the first time in 5 years. No in-laws allowed. Feels like a revolution. Hope you're doing okay. I smile. A genuine, easy smile. I take a picture of the ocean in front of me, the last rays of sun turning the water to liquid gold, and send it to him. His reply comes back a minute later. Wow! Okay, now I'm jealous. Looks like a place worth fighting for. Maybe I'll see it sometime. Maybe you will, I type back, and for the first time, the thought of someone else being here doesn't feel like a requirement or a compromise. It just feels like a possibility. Later, curled up on a ridiculously comfortable outdoor sofa with a glass of wine I call Serenity. "So how's the evil lair?" she asks, her voice crackling with laughter. "It's quiet," I say, looking up at the stars beginning to appear. "Peaceful." "As it should be. You earned it. You know, I was thinking about it the other day," she says, a note of wonder in her voice. "Imagine losing a whole family, a 40-year marriage, a perfect suburban life, all because you couldn't give your sister a damn room." We laugh, a real cleansing laugh that echoes out into the warm night air. After we hang up, I wander back inside. The main living area is vast and open, the sliding glass doors letting the sound of the waves drift in. In the corner, tucked away almost out of sight, is a sofa. The villa is quiet, peaceful. The couch, by the way, folded up. Just like every expectation they ever tried to make mine,